Chapter 1642. Tang Jun wasn't too sure at first, but as time passed, the starry sky energy on the island became denser. Only then did he realize that the three-world island had really come to life. He couldn't believe it, but it was happening. He tried to contact Lu Yi in a hurry, but he couldn't. Only when he heard from Wu Chang and the others that Lu Yi had appeared out of nowhere did he try to contact him again. Not bad, it's come to life. Lu Yi nodded slightly. He noticed the strange expressions on Tang Jun and Luan Xiao's faces, so he added, "My eyes are not bad." Tang Jun couldn't help but twitch. This had nothing to do with eyes, okay? Moreover, the location of the three-world island had nothing to do with Lu Yi. As far as he knew, before Lu Yi went to Lingzhie to find him, he told Luan Xiao to find a large deserted island. So, the one who chose the three-world island was Luan Xiao. But some things were really strange. Tang Jun had learned from the five sisters that Lu Yi had taken over the Matchless Island first. Later, Chu Shen brought the five of them here with Lu Ye's permission to stay. Then, the Matchless Island came to life. Now, the three-world island seemed to be experiencing the same thing as the Matchless Island. Although there were occasional cases of deserted islands coming to life on the Wanxiang Sea, it was too much of a coincidence for the same person to encounter it twice. Moreover, whether it was the Matchless Island or the Three-World Island, they both changed after Lu Yi took over. It was too ridiculous to say that this was a coincidence. Tang Jun couldn't help but recall Lu Ye's seemingly unintentional words when he first chose this deserted island. He said, "What if this deserted island comes to life? People always have dreams." At that time, Tang Jun had snorted and said that if the island came to life, he would call Lu Yi Grandpa. He couldn't call him Grandpa. At his age, calling him Grandpa would shorten Lu Ye's lifespan. But now that he thought about it, Lu Ye's words weren't just about dreams. Otherwise, why would Lu Yi put so much effort into planning the three-world island? He even asked him to build it according to the model of the Matchless Island. There was no reason for him to put so much effort into a deserted island, unless Lu Yi already knew that the island would come to life. Looking at Lu Ye's indifferent expression, Tang Jun was shocked. The three-world island coming to life? Could it be that Lu Yi had something to do with it? But how was that possible? How could such a large island be changed by human strength? Or could it be that Lu Yi was a geomancer? But that didn't seem right either. Luan Xiao was the one who suggested the choice of three-world island, and Lu Yi made the final decision. It couldn't be that Luan Xiao had the same ability. If she really had that ability, she wouldn't have been so excited these days. Narrowing his eyes, Tang Jun asked carefully, "Yi, what kind of spiritual island do you think the three-world island will become in the future?" "A high-class spiritual island?" Lu Yi asked casually. Tang Jun's heart skipped a beat. If the three-world island could really grow into a superior spiritual island, it would be much more valuable than the unparalleled island. After all, the three-world island was several times bigger than the unparalleled island. The bigger the island, the more cultivators it could accommodate, and the stronger its foundation would be. "A top-grade spiritual island?" Lu Yi asked again. Tang Jun almost jumped out of his seat. He was even more certain that Lu Yi had something to do with this. He quickly raised his hand to stop him. "Enough. I think that the three-world island should be able to grow into a middle-grade spiritual island. Any more and we won't be able to handle it." With the strength of the three-world island's cultivators, they could still occupy a low-class spiritual island and a middle-grade spiritual island. But if it was a superior spiritual island, they wouldn't be able to defend it at all. Not to mention a top-grade spiritual island. If the three-world island really became a top-grade spiritual island, everyone would become homeless the next day. "One must have ambition, old Tang." Lu Yi tried to persuade him. Tang Jun couldn't help but roll his eyes. He wanted to have ambition, but he had to have the corresponding strength to back it up. Right now, the three-world island only had him and Luan Xiao. 500 constellations sounded good, but more than half of them were in the early stage of constellation. Their strength was limited. How could they defend such a huge property? He felt that he had to have a good talk with Lu Yi. If the three-world island's revival really had something to do with Lu Yi, then he had to be careful. He didn't want the three-world island to become a top-grade spiritual island. In the end, he would only repeat the same mistake and work for someone else. When Tang Jun and Lu Yi were talking, Luan Xiao didn't interrupt. This was because she had been observing Yen Miao, who was brought back by Lu Yi. Even though Yen Miao hadn't used any power, she could vaguely feel that this beautiful and dignified woman was probably not any weaker than her. In other words, she was also in the late stage of the Moon Jade realm. She was curious. Where did Lu Yi get to know such a powerful cultivator and bring her back? She couldn't have been recruited from the recruitment island, right? This is Great Elder Yen Miao. Lu Yi introduced her to Tang Jun and Luan Xiao, then said to Yen Miao, "This is the Great Island Lord of the Three-World Island, Luan Xiao. This is the Second Island Lord, Tang Jun." This was the first time Yen Miao saw a human other than Lu Yi. Though she had met on the way here didn't count. She smiled and greeted the two of them. They were considered to have gotten to know each other. Tang Jun asked curiously, "Where did you get the title of Great Elder?" Since she was a Great Elder, she should be from some force. Could she be from some spiritual island? Did Lu Yi want the Three-World Island to form an alliance with someone else? This was common on the Wanxiang Sea. Basically, some of the weaker forces would form an alliance and help each other. This way, if there was a dispute, they could help each other without violating the rules of the Wanxiang Sea. Lu Yi said, "The force that Great Elder Yen Miao belongs to is a native force of the Wanxiang Sea. I'll tell you in detail later. Anyway, Great Elder Yen Miao is not an outsider." Tang Jun had expected this. If she was an outsider, Lu Yi wouldn't have brought her in like this. A native force of the Wanxiang Sea. Could it be a force from some realm in the Wanxiang Galaxy? Tang Jun couldn't help but let his imagination run wild. If that was the case, could the Three-World Island be considered to have latched onto the thighs of the local galaxy? However, when he thought of the ending of the Unparalleled Island, he felt a little uneasy. The Unparalleled Island had been poached by the Tianyan realm of the local galaxy. Luan Xiao said, "The cultivators of the Three-World Island are very excited about the revival of the Three-World Island. This way, even if they don't have many channels to earn spirit jades in the future, at least they won't fall behind too much in terms of cultivation." Although the energy on the Three-World Island was still thin and couldn't meet the needs of cultivation, at this rate, it should be enough in less than a month. When the Three-World Island became a middle-grade spirit island in the future, the energy on the island would be even denser. But junior brother, the spirit island is now revived. We don't know what changes will happen in the future. I'm worried that the array we set up previously won't be enough. The array on the Three-World Island was just for show. Other than isolating the island from the outside world and preventing the dissipation of energy, it didn't have any other uses. Such an array could protect a deserted island. After all, no one would attack a deserted island. However, it couldn't protect a spirit island. On the Wanxiang Sea, even a low-grade spirit island was the target of many forces. This place was always in a situation where there were too many monks and too little gruel. Various forces fought over a spirit island. It was common to see one side take the stage after another. Lu Yi nodded. The array does need to be improved and strengthened. When Tang Jun was in charge of setting up the array, Lu Yi had already asked him to keep a backup plan. Therefore, it wasn't difficult to improve and strengthen the array. Tang Jun spread his hands. "I don't have money." This was the main problem. During this period, the cultivators of the Three-World were thinking about how to earn spiritual jades. If it wasn't for Lu Ye's previous instructions, many people would have gone to Laika Island. "I'll think of a way." Lu Yi said, "Please wait for a moment." As he said this, he called Yen Miao. "Grand Elder, please follow me." Yen Miao excused himself and left with Lu Yi. Soon, they arrived at Lu Ye's sleeping quarters. Two seahorse star beasts followed at the side, looking around curiously. "Grand Elder, please wait for a moment." Lu Yi said this and waited quietly. After a while, Hua Si, who had received his message, appeared. Seeing a beautiful woman standing beside Lu Yi and looking at Yen Miao's full chest, she immediately understood. She looked at him meaningfully and a strange smile appeared on her face. Lu Yi looked at her eyes and felt a headache coming on. However, he couldn't say anything in front of Yen Miao. Wuxia handed over a storage ring and said, "All of the spirit pills that I've refined recently are in here." Lu Yi took it and Wuxia left without saying a word. Lu Yi then handed the storage ring to Yen Miao. "These are the pills we refined recently. They're no different from the ones I gave you before. Please accept them." Yen Miao said happily, "Thank you, young friend." Although the treasure body pill was useful to her, it wasn't very useful. However, the spirit refining pill was what she desired the most at this stage. With the help of the spirit refining pill and the curse's power gone, Yen Miao was confident that she could break through to the Sunshine Realm. Grand Elder is too polite. Also, the princess and the other elders are anxious. I'll send you back to report that you're safe. Thank you. Yen Miao was indeed thinking of this. If she was in the Emperor Snail Palace and didn't receive any news for a month, she would definitely be anxious. Moreover, it was time to tell the tribe that the curse's power was gone. She shouldn't enjoy this joy alone. Lu Yi took out his azure sea conch. Just as he was about to blow it, he suddenly remembered something. "All right, Grand Elder, please take out the cold jade board that carried the mark." The conch mark he left on the board was still there. If he didn't remove it, he didn't know if he could open the door to the Emperor Snail Palace. If Lu Yi didn't mention this, Yen Miao would have forgotten about it. She quickly took out the cold jade board. Lu Yi used the conch in his hand to remove the mark before blowing it. The door opened and Yen Miao stepped in with the two seahorses. Before she left, she said to Lu Yi, "Young friend, please wait for me for a moment." She was obviously going to come back. Now that she's back, things are a little troublesome. The child needs an operation, but the hospital's schedule has been full recently. The operation is scheduled for the 13th, so I have to go over on the 12th. If there's a problem with the update, I'll inform everyone. End of chapter. Chapter 1643. Lu Yi waited quietly in front of the door. A moment later, the door rippled, and Yen Miao's figure appeared again. She couldn't help but smile. Just as she thought, the mermaid clan was anxious after waiting for a month. However, they couldn't contact Lu Yi and Yen Miao. They didn't know what was going on with them, whether they had gone out to sea, or whether Yen Miao would be in danger. Amidst this torment, Miao Miao returned and brought them great news. The entire mermaid clan was in an uproar. Several elders, including Queen Bai Shuang and Princess Bai Lu, surrounded Yen Miao and asked her questions. If not for the door's time limit, Yen Miao wouldn't have been able to leave. The mermaid clan knew a lot about the situation in the Wanxiang Sea. After all, Ghost had been cultivating there, and Bai Lu often chatted with her about trivial matters. However, it was just hearsay. Who wouldn't want to see it with their own eyes? Now that great elder Yen Miao had taken this step, the others wouldn't be far behind. Yen Miao handed over a storage ring. "Young friend, there are some spirit jades here. Consider it to be used to buy those spirit pills. However, there aren't enough. I've already ordered people to speed up the mining. I'll make up for it later." "No problem." Lu Yi took the storage ring and glanced at it. There were about a few million spirit jades in it. The money to strengthen the formation was now available. With the mermaid clan as their backing, as long as they could supply spirit pills, the three-world island would never lack for expenses. Also, young friend, when would it be convenient for you to visit our clan's territory again? Several elders would like to come and take a look, Yen Miao said again. With Yen Miao's success as a precedent, the other elders obviously wanted Lu Ye's help to remove the curse power in their bodies. Lu Yi glanced at the door that was slowly disappearing and said, "I can't do it now. I'll have to wait at least 7 days. How about this? I'll come again in 7 days." "No hurry, no hurry. Young friend, you're the most important." Yen Miao smiled. She was in a good mood. Once the curse in his body was resolved, not only would his people be able to leave the sea, but he would also have a much higher chance of advancing to sunshine. Who wouldn't want such a good thing? Lu Yi was about to leave when he suddenly thought of something. "However, there is one thing I must ask Great Elder to know. Nobles are considered a rare race in the starry skies. If your identity is exposed, it will inevitably arouse the covetous eyes of some powerhouses. For someone like Great Elder, as long as you are careful, you will be fine, but for someone like the princess, it is best not to leave the territory. Hearing this, Smoky Meow recalled Bai Lu's expectant gaze and nodded slightly. Although Bai Lu was destined to be disappointed, for safety reasons, it was indeed not good for her to show her face in public. Their tribe had lived under the 10,000 Elephant Sea for too many years, so they didn't know much about the outside world. If Lu Yi didn't specifically warn them, they might really cause some trouble later on. Great Elder, please help yourself. I still have some matters to attend to, Lu Yi said before leaving. Wan Xiao and Tang Jun were still waiting. They didn't know why Lu Yi wanted them to wait here. When Lu Yi returned, he handed them a storage ring filled with millions of spirit jades. Tang Jun was stunned. Where did you get it? Where did Lu Yi get so many spirit jades in such a short time? He definitely didn't have them earlier. Otherwise, he would have given them just now. Lu Yi pondered for a moment and felt that he should let the two know about the existence of the mermaid race. After all, if he wasn't on the three-world island in the future, he would have to rely on the mermaid race to protect the three-world island. The two island masters, Luan Xiao and Tang Jun, were qualified to know about the existence of this ally. Moreover, Lu Yi wanted the cultivators of the three-world island to make a trip to the Heavenly Spiral Palace. There, cultivators had a chance of obtaining a conch of their own as a gift from the Heavenly Spiral Palace. Some conches were very useful. Although there were many strange uses for conches, some of them were very useful. The 500 cultivators of the three-world island, even if they were unlucky, they could at least obtain a few dozen conches, right? If they obtained some rare and powerful conches, it would increase the strength of the three-world island. Have you heard of the mermaid race? Lu Yi asked. Luan Xiao nodded. Of course. I heard that the mermaid race has a wonderful singing voice. Their voices often have incredible power. They can be considered a rare race in the starry sky. As she spoke, Luan Xiao looked at Lu Yi in confusion. She didn't know why he suddenly mentioned the mermaid race. Tang Jun was enraptured. I heard that the women of the mermaid race are all as beautiful as flowers and have beautiful voices. It's a pity that I don't have the chance to see them. Lu Yi glanced at him. I didn't expect you to be such an old man. You're so old, so you're not paying attention to things. That great elder Yen Miao just now is from the mermaid race. What? Luan Xiao and Tang Jun were both shocked. They looked at Lu Yi suspiciously, as if they wanted to see if he was joking. However, the two quickly realized that Lu Yi wouldn't joke about this. It was meaningless. Luan Xiao said, no wonder that great elder gave me a strange feeling. She didn't seem like a pure human. She really isn't a human. As for why she didn't look like the legendary mermaid, Luan Xiao obviously knew the key. That great elder was obviously a woman, so she could naturally transform into legs. Lu Yi said, the 10,000 Elephant Sea has many secrets. It's not as simple as it looks. We only live above the 10,000 Elephant Sea, but there's another deep world below. Tang Jun's eyes twitched. Kid, don't tell me that great elder's race lives under the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Lu Yi looked at him. That's right. The mermaid race that Yen Miao belongs to lives under the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Tang Jun and Luan Xiao were even more shocked. They looked at Lu Yi in disbelief. After a long while, Luan Xiao said, but isn't it said that the 10,000 Elephant Sea's water is so corrosive that even Rizhao can't go deep? That's right. However, a mysterious place has its own mysteries. Many spirit fish and star beasts live under the 10,000 Elephant Sea. They can survive, but of course other races can too. The mermaid race could survive mainly because of the power of the curse. However, there was no need to explain this so clearly. In short, the mermaid race lives under the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Now, we can be considered to have established a very good and solid cooperative relationship with that mermaid race. Tang Jun suddenly understood. So this was what you were referring to when you said they were a local force. He had thought that they were a mermaid race that lived under the 10,000 Elephant Sea in a certain realm of the 10,000 Elephant Galaxy. Calling them a local force didn't seem wrong. So these spiritual jades were given to us by them? Luan Xiao suddenly realized where these spiritual jades came from. They weren't given to us. I made some deals with them. These were obtained from selling spirit pills, Lu Yi explained. What kind of spirit pills could sell for so many spiritual jades at once? Both Yueyao wanted to ask, but she held back. However, since it was a deal, there was no problem with taking them. If they were really given to them, it would be a bit of a waste. I'm telling you this mainly because I want to tell you that the three-world island won't lack spiritual jades in the future. The most important thing for us cultivators of the three-world island now is to improve our own strength. Nothing else matters. Only by improving our own strength can we protect the three-world island. Lu Yi said earnestly, I may leave the 10,000 Elephant Sea soon, so I'll have to trouble you two to take care of the three-world island. Where are you going? Tang Jun frowned. He was the third island master after all. He couldn't just leave everything to others. Lu Yi had left last time and lost Peerless Island, so he was a bit traumatized. There are some things I need to take care of. Lu Yi didn't explain. It had been some time since she returned to the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Although Li Shang had never urged her, it was time to send her back to the Soul Race's ancestral land. Luan Xiao said, do whatever you need to do. Don't worry about the three-world island. When you return, it will definitely be the same. During this time, she and Tang Jun had been worrying about the future of the cultivators of the three-world island. At the end of the day, they lacked money. They hadn't been able to find a solution to this problem, but Lu Yi had already solved it. The cost of several hundred cultivators' future cultivation was not a small amount. Now, they didn't have to worry about it at all. If they couldn't protect the three-world island, then what was the use of the two of them? Also, the merfolk have a conch hall. It's quite mysterious. Lu Yi gave them a simple explanation of the conch hall. Tang Jun and Luan Xiao were both interested. There were all kinds of conches. If they could obtain a useful one, it would be useful for the future development of the three-world island. That's still their secret realm. Will they let us in? Tang Jun asked worriedly. Lu Yi thought for a moment and said, that branch of the merfolk will be the strongest ally of the three-world island in the future. They won't be stingy with opening the conch hall to us. I'll talk to the Grand Elder about this. It shouldn't be a problem. He then turned to Luan Xiao and said, Senior apprentice sister, you have a mission now. Luan Xiao's expression turned serious. Junior apprentice brother, just tell me what to do. In name, she was the Grand Island Master, while Lu Yi was only the third island master. However, she understood that the future of the three-world island depended on Lu Yi. The only thing she could do was to provide him with military force. Accompany Grand Elder Yen Miao for the next few days. She's new here, so she probably wants to go out for a walk. Luan Xiao immediately understood and smiled. Junior apprentice brother, don't worry. I'll take good care of fellow Taoist Yen Miao. After saying that, she told Tang Jun to take care of the three-world island. Then she left to find Yen Miao. Yen Miao was indeed going out for a walk. However, the three-world island was only so big and it hadn't developed yet. Apart from a few cultivators, there wasn't much to see. Just as she was hesitating about whether she should say goodbye to Lu Yi and go out for a walk, Luan Xiao arrived. Yen Miao was overjoyed by her warm invitation. The two girls immediately flew out of the three-world island together, and their figures gradually disappeared into the distance. Since the two Yu Yao were traveling together, no one would be foolish enough to provoke them on the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Thus, there was no need to worry about their safety. Luan Xiao had a clear goal. She brought Yen Miao straight to the 10,000 Elephant Island. After all, that spiritual island was the most prosperous place in the entire 10,000 Elephant Sea. End of chapter. Chapter 1644. Yen Miao was accompanied by Luan Xiao, and it would be 7 days before they left for the Mermaid Territory. Lu Yi had a rare moment of leisure. He didn't dare to relax as he had to improve his foundation as much as possible. Old Tang was preparing to reinforce the island's great formation, and many formation masters were mobilized. Lu Yi didn't need to interfere. He went to check on Yi and Hupo. It was rare that Yi wasn't cultivating, but was talking and laughing with Li Shang. Hupo was lying on the side. Sensing Lu Ye's approach, he immediately opened his eyes and walked over, rubbing his head against Lu Ye's hand. After chatting for a while, Lu Ye's expression turned serious. Fellow Taoist, I still have some trivial matters to take care of. Once I'm done, we'll set off immediately. Li Shang smiled. Don't worry, you can take care of your own matters. It won't be too late to set off when you're done. Lu Yi nodded. He vaguely felt that something was missing, so he asked suspiciously, "Where's Yaya?" Normally, Yaya would be with Hu Pe, but Lu Yi didn't see Yaya this time. He couldn't help but feel puzzled. She went out to play, Li Shang said. Lu Yi didn't care too much. He chatted with Yi for a while before leaving. He walked to another place. This was the Three World Islands pill room. Second senior sister and Hua Ci were refining pills here. The existence of the pill gourd was too sensitive, so it wasn't good to let too many people know about it. For a long time, only a few people from the Jade Blood sect knew about the pill gourd. In the past, refining pills was very difficult because they had to keep an eye on the changes in the flame and be ready to throw in different ingredients at any time. But now, with the pill gourd's help, refining pills was much simpler. They only needed to throw in the corresponding ingredients, and there wasn't even the slightest bit of flame. Therefore, Hua Ci and Shui Yuan's matters were relatively easy. The main reason Lu Yi came here was to bring the Sunlight Star Beast's flesh. This was the main ingredient for refining the treasured body pill. In the past, the treasured body pills were refined using Constellation Spirit Fish Star Beasts. Now that they were refined using Sunshine Star Beasts, the effects would definitely be better. When Lu Yi came over, Shui Yuan greeted him warmly. Hua Ci glanced at him and said with a faint smile, "That woman isn't young. Are you talking about her age or something?" Lu Yi felt a headache. He hurriedly explained, "That's the great elder of the mermaid clan." The words mermaid clan immediately piqued the interest of the two women. Lu Yi then briefly explained the matter of the mermaid clan. Shui Yuan said excitedly, "So in the future, if you don't have the materials to refine the treasure body Dan, you can ask them for help? Just buy it directly," Lu Yi said. "Or you can offset it with some spirit pills." Shui Yuan said, "That makes sense. If we buy the materials from them and refine them into spirit pills and sell them to them, we will never lack the materials for the treasure body Dan." Previously, she was worried about what she would do if she ran out of materials. She didn't know where Lu Yi had found these materials, but now it seemed that she didn't have to worry. As long as the Merfolk clan was willing to help, she would have as many main materials as she wanted. When the time came, not only could he sell it, the cultivators of the three realms could also use it to strengthen their bodies. Moreover, the treasure body Dan from the pill gourd had no impurities and had outstanding effects. When the time came, a group of law cultivators with bodies not inferior to ordinary body cultivators. If someone came looking for trouble, he would definitely give them a surprise. The only pity was that he couldn't do this for spirit refining pills. Although there was a lot of spirit refining grass, there was no other source. He had to prioritize those who needed it, such as Luan Xiaoa, who was preparing to break through to the Sunlight Realm. Hua Ci was more interested in another matter. "Can we enter the Heavenly Spiral Hall? I'll go back and talk to Great Elder Yen Miao. It shouldn't be a problem. You two get ready. I'll go to the Mermaid Clan's territory in a few days. We'll go together then." The two women agreed. Lu Yi left the meat of the Sunlight Star Beast behind and left. He had to take the opportunity to cultivate for the next 7 days. He didn't have to go too far. He just needed to enter the sea near the Three Realms Island. This way, he could save time. After all, everyone was on the same side. It didn't matter if they were seen. When he reached the sea, Lu Yi saw a small figure standing on the edge of a cliff. Lu Yi was shocked and quickly pulled her back. Frowning, he asked, "Yaya, what are you doing?" Yaya's expression was a little dazed, as if she had just woken up. She blinked her eyes and pouted. Her eyes were red. "Daddy, I had a terrible dream." How could she have a dream in the middle of the day? She even came here in her dream. She had mentioned something similar last time. Lu Yi vaguely felt that something was wrong. He asked carefully, but Yaya couldn't explain it clearly. She only said that in her dream, there was a bad guy who beat her up. It hurt a lot, Lu Yi frowned. Speaking of which, ever since Yaya found her second jade bracelet in the Mist Dragon, She seemed to have changed a little. In the past, Yaya was more sleepy, but it was just that. Now, her situation seemed to be more serious. Lu Yi guessed that it might have something to do with her second jade bracelet. The bracelet must be Yaya's. Thinking back to the nightmare that Yaya had mentioned, Lu Yi suspected that the so-called nightmare was something that Yaya had experienced before. Was her memory recovering? If so, it was a good thing for Yaya. No matter what attitude she had towards him after she recovered, it was sad that a Rizhao had been reduced to such a state. But, you can't run around alone in the future. Lu Yi reprimanded her in fear. She even ran to the edge of the cliff. What if she fell? Yaya nodded obediently. Lu Yi sent Yaya back and told Li Shang what had just happened. Li Shang was also scared. Although she and Lu Yi both knew that Yaya was actually a Rizhao, after calling her father and mother for so long, she had some feelings for them. She secretly blamed herself for bringing Yaya with her. At the same time, she felt a little melancholy because she would have to leave in the end. What would happen to Yaya after she left? Lu Yi went into the sea, leaving a doppelganger outside to take care of and cultivate quietly. 7 days passed in the blink of an eye. Yan Miao and Luan Xiao returned. Yan Miao also wanted to walk around more, but after all, the clan's affairs were more important. When it was time to meet Lu Yi, she came back early. These days, she really opened her eyes. She never thought that the world at sea would be so wonderful. Such a wonderful thing was not good for her to enjoy alone. It was true happiness to be able to share it with her clansmen. After several days of traveling, Yan Miao learned one thing. She was able to reach a deal with Lu Yi in terms of elixirs, which was a great advantage. The largest Vientiane Chamber of Commerce on the Vientiane Sea also sold treasure body pills and soul refining pills, but the quality could not be compared with those provided by Lu Yi. Even if there were some best quality elixirs, they were extremely rare, especially the best quality soul refining pills, which were out of stock all year round. It was said that once there was stock, it would be auctioned, and many strong people would fight for it. After knowing this, she was even more grateful to Lu Yi. A person who could help her clan solve the curse problem and provide great help to her clan would undoubtedly become the most important friend of the mermaid clan. So when she came back, Lu Yi mentioned the matter of the Tian Luo Hall, and Yan Miao agreed without hesitation. Lu Yi had been in the Tian Luo Hall, and so had Ghost, so it was not only open to the mermaid clan. Lu Yi immediately asked Luan Xiao to start arranging people to enter the mermaid clan's territory. The 500 people of the three-world island could not all go in at once. Most of them had to stay behind to guard the spiritual island. Under Luan Xiao's arrangement, the 500 people would enter in 5 groups. The truth of the Tian Luo Hall's test was not told in advance, because it was useless to tell them in advance. No matter how good one was at playing or singing, it would depend on one's own luck to receive the Tian Luo Hall's blessing. Lu Yi had been sent into the Tian Luo Hall by Lu without knowing. Soon, the selected 100 people began to gather. Basically, no one knew what was going on, but no one asked too much. They just waited quietly. Among the crowd, Hua Si, Shuiyuan, Yi, and Yaya were all there. Even Hupa came to join in the fun. No one knew how it would pass the test when it entered the Tian Luo Hall. In a large hall, everyone looked at Lu Yi. Then, they saw him take out a green conch and gently blow it. Due to their previous experience of fighting against the insectoids and vampires outside of Apeiron, everyone's hearts tightened when they saw Lu Yi blow this inexplicable thing. They were afraid that another dancer would pop up and lead them to dance and sing. Fortunately, there were no dancers here. As the conch sounded, a door appeared in front of Lu Yi. "Great Elder, please go ahead," Lu Yi said. Yan Miao nodded. He was the first to step in. Then, over 100 cultivators entered the door in an orderly manner. One by one, they disappeared. Finally, it was Tang Jun and Lu Ye's turn. Stepping through the door, they immediately appeared in front of the Tian Luo Hall. At this moment, over 100 cultivators of the three-world island were restless. They had actually seen the mermaid clan. In front of the Tian Luo Hall, a few elders of the mermaid clan, Bai Lu, and the others were waiting. The elders, like Yan Miao, looked no different from humans. However, Bai Lu was a true mermaid with a human body and a mermaid tail. Her unusual style was an eye-opener for the cultivators of the three-world island. Bai Lu had never been stared at by so many people. Her face turned red and she hid behind the elders. "Great Elder!" Lu Yi called out. Yan Miao understood and immediately took out a cold jade board from his storage ring. It was the one with the conch's mark on it. Lu Yi didn't want to swim back. Although he had the protection of treasure coins and it wasn't too dangerous, it would take too long. So, he thought of a way to open the door here and directly return to the three-world island. Taking the cold jade board from Yan Miao, Lu Yi hurriedly left the conch's mark on it and handed it to Tang Jun. Tang Jun said, "Then this old man will go back first." With that, he returned to the three-world island through the door. With the conch's mark on the cold jade board, the next time Lu Yi blew the conch to open the door would be connected to the three-world island. End of chapter. Chapter 1645. He would open the door to the conch palace on the three-world island, then imprint the conch mark on the cold jade board and have someone bring it back to the three-world island. This way, the next time Lu Yi blew the conch, the door would open on the three-world island. This was a trick Lu Yi had thought of. In fact, he could have done this the last time, but he hadn't thought about it. Fortunately, he hadn't lost anything. After swimming in the sea for a month, Lu Yi had cultivated for a month, so he hadn't wasted any time. Moreover, he had discovered the correct way to use the treasure money and its huge potential. Yan Miao had already informed the elders of the situation. The elders naturally wouldn't be stingy and opened the door to the conch palace to this group of future allies. They immediately began to make arrangements. A moment later, 100 cultivators from the three-world island rushed into the conch palace. As for how many of them would benefit, that would depend on their own luck. After the cultivators of the three-world island had made arrangements, only the mermaid elders and Lu Yi remained outside the palace. Lu Yi could clearly feel several pairs of eyes staring at him, as if they were looking at a delicious cake, full of desire. Plagued by the power of the curse, the Mer people could only live in the depths of the 10,000 elephant sea since birth. If it had always been like this, it would have been fine. They could endure the darkness, but now, because of Lu Yi, they had hope of seeing the light. This wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was that after solving the curse, they could pursue a higher cultivation realm. Even if the chances weren't great, it was still a chance. Since ancient times, only the queen's bloodline could reach the sunshine realm in this branch of the mermaid race. It was all because of the curse. The pursuit of a higher realm and greater strength could be said to be the innate instinct of every cultivator. Who could resist such a temptation? Elders, if you're ready, shall we begin? Lu Yi asked. The elders nodded their heads like chickens pecking at rice. We're ready. If Lu Yi hadn't spoken, they wouldn't have been able to bring it up. Now that Lu Yi had taken the initiative, things were much easier. Young friend, this way please. A quiet room has been prepared. Yan Miao gestured with her hand. A short while later, Lu Yi sat upright in a quiet room. In front of her was a woman whose beauty was no less than Yan Miao's. She was the second elder of this branch of the mermaid clan. However, compared to the grand elder's dignified and graceful demeanor, the second elder's demeanor was even more delicate and charming. At this moment, her eyes were filled with anticipation as she stared at Lu Yi. Her beautiful eyes shone as she softly spoke. Thank you for your hard work, little friend. Well said. Please extend your hand, second elder. Lu Yi extended his hand. The second elder placed her small hand on Lu Yi's palm. Lu Yi had the experience of helping Yan Miao deal with the curse power, so she was naturally familiar with this task. She immediately urged the power of the talent tree to slowly invade the second elder's body. Outside the quiet room, the other elders and Bai Lu were waiting. More than 4 hours later, the door to the quiet room opened. Everyone looked up and saw the second elder with a red face. He walked out while panting lightly. His eyes were rippling, but his face was full of excitement. He said softly, "Next." For a few months, the mermaids of the Jade Realm looked at her in confusion. What did you do in there? There was clearly something wrong with the second elder's condition. Yen Miao couldn't help but explain, although the power used to deal with the curse power is relatively gentle, it's still of the fire element. Thus, the process will cause some damage to the body. However, the damage isn't too great. You'll be able to recover after resting for a while. Compared to dealing with the curse power, that little bit of damage was negligible. I'm going, said the third elder as she walked into the quiet room. More than 4 hours later, the usually aloof third elder also walked out of the quiet room like the second elder. Next came the fourth elder, then the fifth elder. In just one day, Lu Yi burned away the curse power in the bodies of the mermaid clan's elders as well as Bai Lu. However, the mermaids of the Jade Realm weren't limited to just the few of them. There were more than 30 mermaids of the Jade Realm. To Lu Yi, this wasn't too troublesome. All she needed was some time and fuel from the talent tree. In any case, she couldn't use the conch right now, so she couldn't return to the three-world island. Lu Yi decided to work harder in the next few days and deal with all the mermaids who needed to deal with the curse power. Within the heavenly conch hall, the 100 cultivators of the three-world island walked out one after another. Some of them obtained conches, while others didn't. Comparatively speaking, only a small portion of them obtained conches. Among the 100 people, less than 10 obtained conches of varying quality. Since the door couldn't be opened, they couldn't return. Naturally, they were warmly welcomed by the mermaids and stayed for the time being. For the time being, they were able to experience the scenery under the sea. 7 days later, the cultivators of the three-world island gathered again. Lu Yi directly opened the door in front of the heavenly conch hall. The cultivators of the three-world island filed in and returned to the three-world island. Before leaving, Lu Yi gave Wuxia a storage ring filled with spirit jades. There were no less than 20 million spirit jades in total. These spirit jades were all extracted by the mermaids during this period of time. Yen Miao had paid for the elixirs she had bought from Lu Yi. However, most of the spirit jades were more than what Yen Miao had bought from Lu Yi. For the time being, it was a gift to thank Lu Yi for helping them burn the power of the curse power. This was a great help to Lu Yi. The burning power of the curse power consumed a lot of the fuel of the talent tree. He still needed to cultivate in the future and urgently needed to replenish the fuel of the talent tree. After Wuxia walked out of the door, she immediately went to find Luan Xiaoa and asked her to take her to Tianyan Island. It didn't take her much effort to find Enja's store. Of the 2 people that Lu Yi had brought with him, Hua Qianying was forced to leave Tianyan Island. However, Enja didn't leave because he had an entire realm behind him. Although he had to pay more rent, he could still make a lot of money by opening a store on Tianyan Island. Wuxia used 20 million spirit jades to buy dragon breath crystals. She planned to send them to Lu Yi the next time he opened the door. In the mermaids' territory, the 100 cultivators of the three-world island left. Another 100 people came and entered the heavenly conch hall under the arrangement of the mermaids. Lu Yi continued to help the mermaids extinguish the power of the curse power. Yen Miao took some time to discuss this with him. Although there were many mermaids, not all of them needed to be cured of the curse power. For example, the mermaids with low cultivation levels didn't need to be cured. Even if they did, it wouldn't be very meaningful. Apart from all the Yu Yao, the rest of the mermaids were carefully selected by the elders. Therefore, there weren't many of them. After nearly half a month, a mermaid walked out of the quiet room with gratitude. Yen Miao walked in leisurely. Lu Yi glanced at her and asked curiously, "Is that all?" He calculated. He helped about 5 mermaids extinguish the curse power of the curse power every day. In the past half a month, about 70 or 80 mermaids had come to this quiet room. However, these 70 or 80 mermaids could be considered the most elite force of the mermaids. They were either Yu Yao or late-stage constellation masters with hopes of becoming Yu Yao. "Young friend, you've been busy for half a month. Take a rest first. There's plenty of time in the future." "There's no rush," Yen Miao said. Lu Yi said, "Actually, I'll be leaving the 10,000 Elephant Sea soon. I haven't set a date for my return. Moreover, this matter won't take much effort. If your clan has any other candidates, feel free to send them over. I'll take care of them all at once." As for the fuel for the talent tree, Wuxia had already sent over 20 million dragon breath crystals when they opened the door for the second time. At the same time, Lu Yi gave her a lot of spirit jades and told her to continue buying dragon breath crystals. These spirit jades were naturally the first to be mined by the mermaids. In the past, although the mermaids owned a spirit jade mine, they didn't need much. Thus, they didn't mine too much. Apart from mining a portion for future use, they didn't mine too much. However, things were different now. The mermaids needed to spend a lot of spirit jades. Naturally, they had to mine more of them. Upon hearing Lu Ye's words, Yan Miao said, "Then I'll have to trouble you, young friend." Originally, the mermaids weren't prepared to let Lu Yi solve the problem for so many of their people. However, they realized something. After the power of the curse disappeared from their bodies, not only did the elders with the deepest cultivation bases see the hope of advancing to the sunshine level, even the other members of the mermaids found it easier to cultivate. In the past few days, there were even 2 late-stage lunar constellation members who had advanced to the lunar jade level, adding another 2 lunar jade level combatants to the clan. This made them realize that not only did the power of the curse restrict the mermaids' freedom, it also restricted their potential. Now that Lu Yi insisted and the mermaids had a need, the 2 sides naturally hit it off. In the next month, Lu Yi stayed in the quiet room and didn't leave. The number of mermaids who had their problems solved by him had already exceeded 200. For this group of mermaids, 200 people was already quite a lot. After all, their entire group only had 2,000 people at most. 10% of them were at the lunar constellation level or above. The rest were basically mermaids who hadn't reached the lunar constellation realm. Lu Yi didn't need to worry about them. Because their cultivation bases were too low, they couldn't recover well from the injuries caused by the curse. Unlike those at the lunar constellation realm, their bodies were tempered and their wounds healed very quickly. Including the previous half a month, the 500 cultivators of the 3-world island came to the mermaids' territory 5 times in a month and a half. Everyone entered the heavenly spiral palace once, but only a few were able to gain anything. The problem of the mermaids could be considered solved for now. Even if they still had other needs, that would be a matter for the future. Lu Yi heaved a sigh of relief. The reason why he spared no effort in helping the mermaids solve the problem of the curse and didn't even mention to Yan Miao and the others about the fuel consumption of the talent tree was that he hoped that one day, if the 3-world island really encountered any trouble, the mermaids would have enough manpower to go and help. Helping the mermaids was equivalent to helping the 3-world island. Of course, the rewards were not small either. During this time, all the spiritual jades that the mermaids had mined were all given to Lu Yi. After splitting them up a few times, Lu Yi received about 70 to 80 million spiritual jades from Yan Miao. Apart from leaving a portion as backup for the 3-world island, he had Wuxia buy the rest for him into dragon breath crystals. End of chapter. Chapter 1646. According to Wuxia, Inja was grinning from ear to ear after the deal was done. He repeatedly reminded her to tell Lu Yi that he would come over for tea when he was free. Where else could he find such a large and stable customer? Including the previous transaction with Lu Yi, the total amount of spirit jades he had received from Lu Yi alone was 1 or 200 million. This was a huge sum of money for the domain behind Inja and could help the entire domain develop. Of course, Lu Yi didn't have time to drink tea. He didn't even have time to drink the spirit tea Hua Qianyin gave him. The merfolk tribe didn't need his help anymore, so he wasn't in a hurry to return to the 3-world island. After this trip, the fuel for his talent tree had been greatly replenished. It was time to cultivate. He had to enter the sea anyway. It was the same here or on the 3-world island. It was more convenient here. After saying goodbye to Yan Miao, Lu Yi dove into the deep sea, allowing the power of the sea to corrode his body. He also hunted some spirit fish and star beasts. With the treasure coins in hand, even if he encountered Ri, he still had the power to fight back. Time passed. Lu Yi would occasionally return to the merfolk tribe's territory to rest and recuperate. However, he spent most of his time in the sea. While his cultivation base had been greatly stabilized and accumulated, he also gained a lot of spirit fish and star beasts. Most of them were constellation realm. He didn't even need to use the treasure coins to kill these spirit fish and star beasts. Occasionally, he would need to use the treasure coins when he encountered Yu Yao's star beasts. Even Ri couldn't resist the power of the golden treasure coins, let alone Yu Yao. Once she was hit by the golden light, she would be at Lu Ye's mercy. A month later, when Lu Yi was searching for spirit fish near the merfolk tribe's territory, he suddenly felt something different in his body. At the same time, many inexplicable insights appeared in his mind. He quickly stopped and checked his body. When he looked inside himself, he saw that his flesh and blood were shining. This was the condensation of the essence of his flesh and blood. Every cultivator who entered the constellation realm and began to temper their physique would experience this change. The more light there was in the body, the better the physique was tempered. However, different constellation cultivators would definitely have different situations of tempering their physique, especially cultivators of different sections. In the cultivation of the constellation realm, body cultivators had a relatively better advantage because they paid attention to the cultivation of their physical bodies and could better temper their physique. At this moment, Lu Ye's body was filled with light. Specks of light shone brightly, a clear sign that he had been tempered to the extreme. Moreover, although the surrounding seawater was still invading his body, Lu Yi could clearly feel that it could no longer bring him any improvement. In other words, the essence of his physique had been tempered to the limit. Of course, this was only the limit of his current realm. In the future, when he advanced to Yu Yao and Ri Zhao, the upper limit of his physique would increase. This was also why it had taken him so much effort to kill Bai Jin back then. Bai Jin's physique was on a completely different level from his own. Generally speaking, once a cultivator reached this level of cultivation, they could begin to prepare for the advancement of Yu Yao. Lu Yi was now qualified to do so. It had not been easy. It had been several years since he advanced to the late-stage constellation realm. Even with the help of the talent tree, the efficiency of refining spirit jades could not be compared to going deep into the 10,000 Elephant Sea. However, ever since he returned to the 10,000 Elephant Sea, he had been cultivating under the sea intermittently for at least 2 months. After such a long time, he had no idea how much energy he had devoured and refined before he finally reached this step. If not for the reincarnation tree's reminder, Lu Yi would have already prepared for the advancement. This was because he could feel that it would not be difficult for him to advance to Yu Yao. The spirit qi in his body was pure enough. It could be said that there were no impurities. This would greatly increase the success rate of converting spirit qi into dermic power. However, with the reincarnation tree's reminder, he did not have any thoughts of advancing for the time being. No matter what, he had to go take a look at the Yin-Yang Great Millstone first. Elder Shu had lived for so long. Perhaps he had existed since the formation of this galaxy. Naturally, he knew some secrets that others did not. The Yin-Yang Great Millstone would definitely be beneficial for advancing to Yu Yao. However, compared to tempering his physique to the extreme, Lu Yi was more concerned about another matter. He silently pondered for a moment, then turned around and flew in the direction of the merfolk's territory. A moment later, he crossed the huge spirit jade mine and returned to the royal snail palace. He returned to his residence. He raised a hand, and his qi and blood gathered on his fingertip. In an instant, a drop of blood appeared on his fingertip. The blood was not bright red. Instead, it was a dark red. Lu Yi didn't show it on the surface, but he could clearly sense the terrifying power contained within this drop of crimson blood. If it were to suddenly erupt, it would be even stronger than his full-powered attack. It might even be able to take on Yu Yao head-on. The enlightenment he had gained under the sea just now once again surged into his mind. Treasure blood. It was something even more profound than blood essence. If blood essence was the essence refined from one's own flesh and blood, then treasure blood was the essence refined from blood essence. Ordinary cultivators did not have such things. They usually only had blood essence. The so-called treasure blood could only be possessed by members of the blood tribe. Furthermore, it could only be possessed by members of the blood tribe who had a sacred bloodline. Of course, There were also some exceptionally talented members of the blood tribe who had cultivated the blood tribe's secret techniques to the extreme and condensed their own treasure blood. However, these were extremely rare cases. Even members of the blood tribe who possessed a sacred bloodline only had a chance of condensing treasure blood. It was not guaranteed. The enlightenment Lu Yi had just gained came from the inheritance of the blood tribe's bloodline. This made him feel a little strange. To be honest, before this thing was born, he did not even know about the existence of treasure blood. It was only when his physique reached the extreme that this drop of treasure blood was naturally born. Lu Yi felt that this had something to do with the fact that he had refined a lot of sacred blood. Ordinary members of the blood tribe's sacred bloodline could only refine 3 to 5 drops of sacred blood. How much sacred blood had he refined? He had at least a few hundred drops. His sacred blood was so strong that it could be said that no member of the blood tribe could compare to him. Therefore, even treasure blood, which was difficult for members of the blood tribe to refine, could be naturally born in his body. Bloodline inheritance was a very wonderful thing. It was not an intuitive teaching, but when one's bloodline reached a certain level, the hidden mysteries of the bloodline would naturally be revealed. In the starry sky, many powerful star beasts, strange beasts, and even demonic beasts relied on bloodline inheritance because they were extremely rare. Take Hoopa for example. After it was born, it did not have any elders to teach it, but it could still transform into a frustrated spirit. This was a bloodline inheritance, a kind of instinct. The enlightenment Lu Yi had just gained was a kind of bloodline inheritance related to treasure blood. For a moment, he realized the many magical uses of treasure blood. Directly detonating the energy contained in it was the simplest method, but also the most wasteful method. With a slight thought, the treasure blood in his hand shone brightly. Then, it twisted and quickly turned into a human figure. A figure that was exactly the same as Lu Yi, a clone. With the help of treasure blood, he could easily create a clone that belonged to him. The doppelganger technique was a very practical secret technique. Many cultivators had mastered it, but there were not many who could cultivate this secret technique to the extreme to the point where they could pass off as the real thing. There were many types of doppelganger techniques. For example, his master Yun Xuechu's Shao Dai doppelganger was created with the help of an external object. Shao Dai's true body was only a creation of Yanshi. This type of clone was different from the true body. It could even be said that they were not the same kind of life form. There were also clones created with the help of treasures, but they were also created with external help. The doppelganger in front of Lu Yi was not created by external forces, but by his own precious blood. This kind of doppelganger was even more profound and perfect than ordinary doppelganger techniques. It was not easy for others to see through it. However, Lu Ye's thought stirred. He stimulated the might of his talent tree and created another clone. He already had a doppelganger. This time, the 3 Lu Yes stood together and looked at each other in dismay. The scene was incomparably strange. After silently comparing them, Lu Yi soon discovered that the clone condensed from his own treasure blood was somewhat inferior to the one condensed from the talent tree. This difference was not in appearance, but in the inside. Although he could control the treasure blood clone like an extension of his arm and could even pass it off as the real one and display his full strength, compared to the clone condensed from the talent tree, it did not have the ability to quickly devour and refine it. Moreover, Lu Yi could feel that he could not be too far away from the treasure blood clone. Otherwise, he would lose contact with it. This was clearly inferior to the talent tree clone. Although there was also a distance limit between the talent tree clone and the true body, this distance was much farther. He had to admit that the bloodline inheritance of the blood race was very powerful. However, compared to the clone technique, the talent tree clone was clearly superior. To Lu Yi, the precious blood avatar was of little value. The only advantage was that it was fast. It was not like the talent tree clone that could be traced. Therefore, if he used the treasure blood clone in battle, Lu Yi could not help but daydream. It seemed to be a good choice. It could catch people off guard. In any case, the birth of the treasure blood was an accident. It would be good for Lu Yi to have another way to deal with the enemy. Moreover, Lu Yi could feel that his understanding of the treasure blood was still very superficial. Even if he had a lot of enlightenment just now, he could not immediately recognize the value of the treasure blood. These things needed to be slowly explored and practiced in the future. He suddenly remembered that when he obtained the sacred bloodline inheritance, it contained information that when the bloodline was cultivated to the extreme, one could be reborn from a drop of blood. Back then, Lu Yi was only at the true lake realm, so he naturally scoffed at it. Now that his cultivation had reached the star constellation realm, his horizons were much higher than before. Now that he looked at it again, there were no clues about rebirth from a drop of blood. However, who could guarantee that if the sacred bloodline was refined again, the treasure blood would not undergo unexpected changes? Lu Yi found that he had one more thing to do in the future, and that was to condense the treasure blood. Just now, only one drop of the treasure blood was produced. It could be considered a change after the essence of the physique was tempered to the extreme. However, he could still condense more treasure blood and store it in his body. It would not be too late to use it when he needed it. Thinking about it, when the time came, one drop of treasure blood would be able to transform into a clone. What if it was 10 drops, 100 drops? It would be a proper Lu Yi army. Each of them would be able to display his full strength. The most reassuring thing was that the treasure blood clone could even transform into clothes, unlike the talent tree clone, which he had to give a set of clothes to wear every time. End of chapter. Chapter 1647. Lu Yi returned to the three-world island. His physique had been tempered to the extreme. There was no need for him to stay in the sea any longer. When he passed through the door, he saw a few mermaids waiting at the side. When they saw Lu Yi, they bowed politely and entered the door, returning to the mermaid territory. While cultivating in the sea, Lu Yi did not return. However, he would open the door every few days. The mermaids who had been cured by him needed to use the door to travel between the sea and the sea. Therefore, the three-world island was not only filled with cultivators of the three-world island. There were also some mermaids. They traveled together and enjoyed the scenery of the sea. It was an eye-opening experience. However, only the mermaids dared to go out. The mermaids could only walk around the three-world island. There was no other reason. The women of the mermaid clan looked no different from humans, except that they were all as beautiful as flowers. However, the men of the mermaid clan were different. They looked ferocious. Although they could take human form, it was still inappropriate for them to show their faces in public. It was fine for them to just stroll around the three-world island. Lu Yi spread out his divine perception. He realized that although there were more cultivators on the three-world island than before, it was much less lively. The foundation of the three-world island had long been established. Although the three-world island had yet to reach the level of a mid-tier spiritual island, after several months of accumulation, it was not far from it. Furthermore, the island had a stable source of spiritual jades, so most of the cultivators in the three-world island were in a state of cultivation. As a result, the entire spirit island was quieter. There were not many traces of people coming and going. Lu Yi estimated that at this rate, the three-world island would definitely become a middle-grade spirit island in 1 or 2 months. When that time came, the cultivators of the three-world island would not only be able to borrow spiritual jades but also the resources of the spirit island. Their cultivation efficiency would increase greatly. When it became a high-grade spirit island in the future, it would be even more amazing. When Lu Yi appeared, Luan Xiaoa and Tang Jun arrived almost at the same time. Old Tang looked at Lu Yi, who had not appeared for a long time. "You finally came back." "My cultivation was delayed for a few days," Lu Yi explained casually. Tang Jun obviously didn't believe it. It was said that Lu Yi had a very good relationship with the princess of the mermaid clan. He had stayed under the sea and didn't come back. Who knew if he was trapped in a gentle land? The mermaid princess. His expression turned solemn. "I have something to tell you." Lu Yi nodded. "That's great. I have something to discuss with the two of you." Luan Xiaoa said, "This is not the place to talk. Let's go to the conference hall." After a short while, the 3 island masters of the 3-world island gathered in the conference hall. Lu Yi took out the spirit tea that Hua Qianying had given him, brewed a pot, and poured some for Luan Xiao and Tang Jun. Tang Jun took a sip and felt that the tea was really good, so he directly took the teapot. He was also considered to have seen the world. When he was a consecrated elder on Wushuang Island, many forces relied on their connections to get a lot of good tea, but those spirit teas seemed to be inferior to the one in front of him. He felt that after drinking this tea, his mind would become much more peaceful. Drinking it over a long period of time could even increase one's cultivation and strength. One had to realize that he was a moon jade middle stage cultivator. Ordinary spirit tea would only be able to taste its flavor and wouldn't have any other effects. The quality of Lu Ye's tea was obviously not low. "What can I do for you too?" Lu Yi asked while sipping his tea. Luan Xiao said, "Actually, it's not a big deal and it has nothing to do with us." Tang Jun interrupted, "It's about Tianyan Island." "What's wrong with Tianyan Island?" Lu Yi had some guesses, but he still asked. Tang Jun held the teapot and chuckled. "Tianyan Island's level is showing signs of weakening. I went to take a look a few days ago and found that it's true. Right now, Tianyan Island is probably just a high-class spirit island." He had a gloating look on his face, and it was obvious that he was in a good mood. Tianyan Island was Wushuang Island, and Wushuang Island was lost in his hands. Even if Lu Yi said that the spirit island was lost, it was fine as long as the people were fine. But it was still a top-class spirit island. Tang Jun seemed to have accepted it, but he wasn't so open-minded. He had been thinking about when he could take Tianyan Island back, but he also knew that this idea was unrealistic. Tianyan realm was a native realm, and it had the entire Wanxiang galaxy behind it. Who could take it? A few days ago, he suddenly heard that there were some changes in Tianyan Island, so he immediately went to check it out. In the end, he found that Tianyan Island was really just a high-class spirit island. He was overjoyed, thinking that this was Tianyan realm's retribution. The changes in Tianyan Island couldn't be hidden from the senses of those who paid attention. It was originally a commercial spirit island, and there were countless cultivators coming and going, so there was no way to keep the news a secret. A high-class spirit island and a top-class spirit island were only one level apart, but in reality, the difference was like heaven and earth. One didn't have a spirit jade mine, while the other had a spirit jade mine. The value of the two couldn't be compared at all. 4 spirit islands, from low class to high class, there was only an increase in quality. There was no substantial change. Only when a top-class spirit island became a top-class spirit island would there be a fundamental change. Otherwise, Tianyan realm wouldn't have tried so hard to take Wushuang Island. They had to take Jiao Yan's reputation into consideration, but no one could ignore the temptation of a top-class spirit island. And I heard that the situation on Tianyan Island is constantly changing. If one day Tianyan Island becomes a medium-class spirit island, low-class spirit island, and then a deserted island, then there will be a good show to watch. By seizing Wushuang Island, Tianyan Island had offended Jiao Yan. If a top-tier spiritual island were to become an inferior spiritual island or even a deserted island, Tianyan Island would suffer a double loss. It was no wonder that Tang Jun was gloating. Lu Yi had expected this to happen. Wushuang Island's prosperity was achieved by the small constellation hall. When he took back the small constellation hall that day, Wushuang Island would return to its original state sooner or later. The reason why it could continue to maintain its status was that it had accumulated a lot of starry sky energy. Now, it was only consuming it, but there was no accumulation. Naturally, its grade kept falling. Now, it had fallen from a top-class spirit island to a high-class spirit island, and it would fall even faster in the future. In less than half a year, Tianyan Island would become a deserted island. He wondered how the cultivators of Tianyan realm would feel when that happened. "Kid, what you said back then is true." Tang Jun chuckled. When Lu Yi parted ways with Chu Shen outside Che Ling realm, he had said to Chu Shen that he would sit and watch him build a tall building, entertain guests, and watch his building collapse. But now, the building had collapsed. As he spoke, Tang Jun's expression suddenly turned serious. Thinking about it carefully, he felt that something was not quite right. The unparalleled island had only started to change after Lu Yi had taken over. It had slowly become a top-grade spirit island. When the unparalleled island had been conquered and Lu Yi had returned, The unparalleled island had deteriorated from a top-grade spirit island to a top-grade spirit island in a few months. However, a deserted island like Three World Island had inexplicably come to life, and its grade was improving, just like Wuxia Island in the past. Tang Jun's heart skipped a beat, and he couldn't help but glance at Lu Yi. Could Lu Yi have something to do with all this? Otherwise, how could things be so coincidental? Also, when he chose Three World Island to build Wuxia Island, Lu Yi seemed to be certain that this deserted island would come to life. It turned out that his foresight was not bad. However, this seemed to have nothing to do with foresight. However, if the changes in Three World Island and Tianyan Island really had anything to do with Lu Yi, Tang Jun could not understand. What kind of shocking method was this to be able to change the grade of a spirit island at will? Kid? Tang Jun opened his mouth. Lu Yi turned his head and saw that Tang Jun wanted to say something but hesitated. Finally, he said, "Forget it." Regardless of whether this had anything to do with Lu Yi, he was happy to hear about it. Moreover, if Lu Yi really had such a ridiculous method, it would be better if he did not ask too much about it. "Is this what the two of you wanted to talk about?" Lu Yi asked. Tang Jun nodded. That was it. There was nothing else. Recently, Three World Island had been very peaceful. The constellations below were all cultivating. The only difference was that there were many mermaids here. "What do you want to talk about?" Tang Jun asked. He still remembered what Lu Yi had said. "I have to leave for a while," Lu Yi said. He had told the two of them about this before. At that time, the time was not right. He had some things to do and could not leave for the time being. Now that he was busy and had cultivated to the peak of the constellation realm, it was time for him to pursue a higher realm. Wan Xiao asked, "When will you be back?" Even though Lu Yi was only a constellation cultivator and his cultivation was much weaker than Tang Jun's, ever since he came to the Sea of Constellations, he had been the backbone of the cultivators of the three realms. The changes that were happening on Three World Island were all because of him. Everything else aside, if he had not facilitated the trade with the mermaids, the cultivators of the three realms would not have enough spiritual jades to cultivate. They would not have had the funds to complete the defensive formation on Three World Island either. In comparison, Wan Xiao felt that she was very useless. Apart from her late moon jade cultivation base, she had nothing else to offer. Lu Yi shook his head. "I don't know for now, but it shouldn't be too soon." He did not know where the Spirita's ancestral grounds were. He had to send Li Shang back first before he could attend to his own matters and make a trip to the Yin Yang Great Millstone. Wan Xiao pondered for a moment, then said, "Our island is still in the process of being reborn. According to fellow Taoist Tang's previous experience, if this continues, our island has a chance of becoming a high-grade spiritual island within a year. Let's not talk about high-grade. Even a mid-grade spiritual island would be attractive enough to the cultivators of the outside world. However, the cultivators of the three realms might not be able to deal with opponents that are too strong. What should we do if an enemy invades us?" Tang Jun said, "That's right, Ti. Fellow Taoist Wan and I have been worried about this recently. You have a good relationship with the mermaids, so can you ask them to lend you a hand when the time comes? Of course, if everything is peaceful, then nothing will happen." They knew that Lu Yi had a good relationship with the mermaids. However, they did not know to what extent. Lu Yi said, "Don't worry." Hearing this, Lu Yi said, "You don't have to worry about that. Although the mermaid clan's base is under the sea, our three-world island is actually a transit point for them when they go out to sea. If they want to go out to sea, they have to go through Three-World Island. I've helped the mermaid clan a little before, and now we have a long-term business relationship with each other. They can be said to be Three-World Island's most solid ally. If our island is in trouble, you can just ask the mermaid clan for help." End of chapter. Chapter 1648. There were only two ways to maintain an alliance. One was through emotional ties, and the other was through benefits. Three-World Island and the mermaid clan had both. Naturally, they were unbreakable. Of course, be it emotional ties or benefits, Lu Yi was at the center. Although Three-World Island's foundation had not changed much, with a strong ally like the mermaid clan, their ability to protect themselves was not something Peerless Island could compare to. If there was really an enemy attack, the three-world island could casually send out 5 Moonjade advanced stage experts. As for the Star Constellation sect, there were 500 people from the three-world island and close to 200 from the Mermaid clan. There was a total of 700 people. Defending one spiritual island was not a big problem. This was also why Lu Yi could leave without worry. What happened at Peerless Island could be done once. He could not let his hard work to build up his foundation and spread his name, only to have it taken over by others. If that's the case, then there's no problem. Luan Xiao nodded. Since Lu Yi said that the Mermaid clan was Three-World Island's strongest ally, she did not have to worry about anything. Lu Yi took out an item and said, "Senior sister, keep this. This is the key to opening a path to the Mermaid clan's territory." He was leaving Three-World Island, so he could not bring the Azure Sea Conch with him. If he needed to borrow troops from the Mermaid clan, he could only use the Azure Sea Conch to open a path. Therefore, he had to keep this item. Shui Yuan and Hua Ci were busy refining pills. Moreover, they were only at the early stage of the Constellation Islands. Lu Yi thought about it and decided to leave this conch with Luan Xiao. Luan Xiao was familiar with this Azure Sea Conch. She had seen Lu Yi blow this conch before and knew its use. Luan Xiao took it seriously and said, "Junior brother, don't worry. I will take good care of this item. When you return, I will definitely return it to you in one piece." Lu Yi chatted with Luan Xiao and Tang Jun for a while more before leaving. The situation at Three-World Island had stabilized. Now that they had people and spiritual jades, they had them. The cultivators of Three-World Island had to quickly raise their cultivation. Lu Yi could also leave without worry. After leaving the meeting hall, Lu Yi went to the alchemy room and chatted with his second senior sister and Hua Ci, who were busy refining pills. Knowing that he was leaving, Shui Yuan only warned him, "When you're outside, be careful. Don't get involved in things that you shouldn't. You also have to be wary of people you don't know. After all, you may know a person for a long time without understanding their true nature, especially when it comes to beautiful women." After nagging for a while, Shui Yuan suddenly burst into laughter. "Forget it. In terms of experience, you are more experienced than any of us. We can't treat you like a child. In short, come back safely." Lu Yi couldn't help but nod. In fact, it felt pretty good to be nagged like this. He looked at Hua Ci. "Do you have anything to say?" Hua Ci thought for a moment and looked at him meaningfully. "Don't be a womanizer. Am I that kind of person?" Lu Yi was filled with righteous indignation. "Hee hee." Hua Ci chuckled as she tossed the herbs into the pill gourd. Lu Yi didn't lose her temper. She took out an item and tossed it to Hua Ci. "Take this." Hua Ci took it and curiously looked at the ancient coin in her hand. She vaguely sensed something. "A rare treasure?" "You could say that." Lu Yi nodded. "How powerful can it be?" Hua Ci asked. The power of rare treasures were usually stronger. Lu Yi had given this item to her before he left, so it was obvious that he wanted her to have the ability to protect herself. Therefore, Hua Ci estimated that if she activated this coin with her own strength, she would be able to unleash the power of a late-stage constellation realm cultivator. "It's just SOSO against a Rizhao." Hua Ci's hand trembled. Shui Yuan also looked at him in shock, as if she wanted to see if he was joking from his expression. "I've verified it. When I came back from the lower reaches of the sea with Great Elder Yen Miao, we encountered a Rizhao star beast. We used this treasure to deal with it." Lu Yi immediately explained the situation at that time. Hua Ci finally understood. "So, this treasure coin has a restraining effect, but it doesn't have any killing power? No wonder its power was so terrifying that it could be effective against Rizhao." "That's right." Lu Yi nodded. "After you use it, throw it into the Wanxiang Sea and soak it for a while. Its power will be restored." As for how to throw it into the Wanxiang Sea, that was simple. She just needed to find a fishing line and tie it up. Hua Ci did not say a word and threw the treasure coin back. "Take care of it yourself. I don't want to be a widow." She stopped before she could finish her sentence. Lu Yi looked at her with a smile. "Widow what? Just take care of it." Hua Si did not continue the conversation. When Lu Yi went out, having a treasure coin like this to protect himself was a life-saving asset. How could he leave it here? Lu Yi grabbed her hand and slapped the treasure coin into her hand. I have other life-saving items. Moreover, this treasure coin can only be used to its fullest in the Wanxiang Sea. Otherwise, even if I carry it with me, it can only be used for one attack. It would be different in the Wanxiang Sea. After one attack, there would be another attack, and the attacks would be endless. How could there be so many spiritual jades for it to devour if he carried it with him? Hua Si clearly did not believe him. She only stared at him with a determined expression. Lu Yi had no choice but to slightly activate the red talisman's power. Hua Si was relieved. With a red talisman on him, he indeed had the ability to protect himself. I heard that when you were outside the Wushuang continent, you used a red talisman to kill Yu Yao. Where did you get these red talismans? Hua Si asked curiously. As far as she knew, only Ri Zhao, who was proficient in talismans, had a chance of refining red talismans. Back then, Lu Yi had just cultivated to the constellation realm and he already had a red talisman. It was very unreasonable. A senior gave it to me. I helped him a little. Lu Yi scratched his face. Hua Si looked at him for a while and suddenly smiled. I suddenly remembered something. Lu Yi, come with me. She slowly stood up and walked out. Lu Ye's heart skipped a beat. He hurriedly said, if there's anything, just say it here. You're treating me too much like an outsider. Get lost. Shui Yuan seemed to have realized something. She kicked Lu Yi and sent him flying. 3 days later, Lu Yi found Li Shang. Fellow Taoist, we can set off now. Li Shang looked at Lu Yi worriedly. I'm not in a hurry. Why don't you rest for a few days? You don't look too good. It's okay, it's okay. Lu Yi sniffed. It's not good to stay in a dangerous place. It's important that we leave quickly. You haven't been home for so long, your family must be worried. Li Shang was confused. But since Lu Yi was so insistent, she naturally wouldn't refuse. Moreover, she really wanted to go back to the ancestral land. Then I'll make some preparations. Fellow Taoist, please wait for a moment. Li Shang nodded and suddenly remembered something. About Yaya, I've already talked to Yaya. Let her stay here. With my second senior sister looking after her, it won't be a big problem. Before leaving, he naturally had to take care of things that needed to be taken care of. He didn't forget about Yaya. However, he couldn't bring Yaya with him this time, so he could only ask his second senior sister to look after her. Although Yaya herself was a little reluctant, she was still sensible. She just wanted Lu Yi to come back early. Lu Yi naturally agreed and said that he would bring her a lot of delicious fruits when he came back. That's good. Li Shang sighed. She wasn't going to say goodbye to Yaya, so as not to feel uncomfortable. Thinking about it, if they didn't see each other in the future, Yaya would slowly forget her. Li Shang went to prepare for departure. Lu Yi waited for a moment, only to see leisurely ride over on Hupo. Standing beside him, she tilted her head and looked at him with a smile. Lu Yi suddenly had a bad feeling. Frowning, he asked, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm going to the ancestral land of the Spiritas with Sister Li Shang." Nonsense. Lu Yi reprimanded with a straight face. "What are you going to do there? Be good and stay in the three-world island." When Li Shang said that she wanted to take Yi and Hupo to the ancestral land of the Spiritas, Lu Yi didn't refuse. He just let her try it herself because he felt that Yi would definitely not agree. After all, the two of them had been separated for too long. It was rare for them to be together again, so how could Yi leave? Who would have thought that Yi would actually be persuaded by her? He didn't know what Li Shang said to her, but in any case, Li Shang and Yi had been inseparable recently. He said, "But Lu Yi, I'm part of the Spiritas. My previous cultivation path was wrong. Only by going to the ancestral land of the Spiritas can I find a suitable path for myself." The gap between her and Lu Ye's cultivation was getting bigger and bigger. If this continued, sooner or later, she wouldn't be able to help at all and would only become a burden. But if she cultivated the secret arts of the Spiritas, it would be different. At that time, even if there was still a gap between her cultivation and Lu Ye's, As long as she used the spirit possession technique, she would be able to provide great help to Lu Yi. She also had Hupe. This was the natural sacred beast of the Spiritus. Only the Spiritus had a way to fully excavate Hupe's potential. Lu Yi glared, but after hearing Yi's words, he didn't know how to persuade her. Suddenly, he somewhat understood his second senior sister's feelings before. She had always regarded Yi as a child, but in fact, Yi was no longer a child. She was also a constellation and also hoped to become stronger. Okay, just agree. Yi pulled Lu Ye's hand and shook it while acting spoiled. Also, big sister Li Shang will take good care of me. You don't have to worry. There's also Hupe. Hupe will be warmly welcomed there. With him, I won't be bullied. Lu Ye's face darkened and he didn't say a word. Yi moved her little head closer to him and looked at him with teary eyes. She said sweetly, Lu Yi, don't give me that. Lu Yi turned his head. When he heard that Yi wanted to go to the Spirita's ancestral land with Li Shang, he instinctively wanted to refuse. But then he thought about it. He was going to leave the three-world island. Was he going to let Yi stay here and wait for him? Just like when he left the 9 states, Yi had always been waiting for him in the 9 states. But whether it was the 9 states or the three-world island, they were all places he was familiar with. If he wanted to find Yi, he could find her at any time. The Spirita's ancestral land was different. He knew nothing about that place. If Yi went there, he couldn't find her even if he wanted to. But if he really did delay Yi's future because of this, how could he bear to do it? Lu Ye's heart was in turmoil. End of chapter. Chapter 1649. No matter what, you're not allowed to go. Lu Yi hardened his heart after thinking for a long time. He rarely spoke so harshly to Yi, but he couldn't care less this time. The ancestors of Immortal Origin City had no choice but to go to the Soul Race's ancestral land because they couldn't sleep in Immortal Origin City forever. Yi was different from them. Even if Li Shang took care of her, Li Shang was only a late-stage constellation realm cultivator. A place like the Soul Race's ancestral land had existed since time immemorial, and there were probably many experts there. If Yi was bullied, who would stand up for her? Furthermore, who could guarantee that the powerhouses of the Soul clan would not have any devious thoughts towards Hupe? The bond between Yi and Hupe was not ordinary, and Hupe treated Yi as his master. When the time came, if an innocent man got into trouble for possessing a jade ring, Li Shang alone would not be able to take care of Yi. Therefore, even if he felt sorry for Yi, Lu Yi didn't dare to let her go. It was nothing more than the Soul Race's cultivation path. When he became strong in the future, he would personally visit the Soul Race's ancestral land and find the right path for Yi. Yi puffed up her cheeks and looked at him angrily. I want to go. You're revolting. Lu Yi turned to look at Hupe. Look after her and don't let her go anywhere. As long as Hupe didn't leave Three-World Island, Yi couldn't leave. Hupe shrunk his neck and stood to the side, looking away. Don't drag me into your quarrel. I'm just a tiger, I'm innocent. You're arbitrary. He felt wronged. Lu Yi turned around and gave her the back of her head. So be it if you want to act arbitrarily. Just this once. Not daring to look at Yi's expression, Lu Yi went to find his second senior sister and Shui Yuan. Li Shang didn't have much to prepare. A moment later, Li Shang entered Lu Ye's divine sea. Lu Yi summoned his star boat and flew out. Lu Yi didn't know how to go to the Soul Race's ancestral land, but Li Shang did. After some discussion, Lu Yi took out a star chart on the star boat and determined the direction. To reach the Soul Race's ancestral land, one had to pass through the insect path and enter a galaxy called Blue Moon. Lu Yi did not know much about the Zhangyue galaxy's foundation. After all, he had never come into contact with it before. However, he was only a constellation now. If he wanted to borrow the Zhangyue galaxy's path, it would not be a problem. It could even be said that if Lu Yi did not need to pass through the insect path guarded by Yu Yao, he would not need to greet anyone when entering Zhangyue galaxy. So what if Lu Yi came? Why would Blue Moon care? Of course, the premise was that Lu Yi didn't cause any trouble in Blue Moon galaxy. After exiting the Wanxiang Sea, they flew towards the insect passage that connected to the Zhangyue galaxy. However, the insect passage in the Zhongyue galaxy was quite far from the Wanxiang Sea. Its location was also quite remote in the Wanxiang galaxy, so it would still take some time. Along the way, it was quite peaceful. Lu Ye's speed wasn't very fast. Sitting on the star boat, he kept sighing and frowning, as if he were a parent who was worried about his disobedient child. "Why are you doing this? You know you can't stop him." Li Shang's voice sounded. Lu Yi was very curious. "What did you say to her?" "She's rarely this stubborn about anything. She would rather make herself unhappy than to stick to her original beliefs." Li Shang said, "Don't you know the source of her stubbornness?" "Should I know?" Li Shang laughed. "I tried to persuade her to go to the ancestral land with me, but she never agreed until one day, she suddenly came to ask me about the soul possession technique and decided to go with me to the ancestral land. So she wants to go back, not because she wants to become stronger, but because she wants to be able to help you one day." Lu Yi fell silent. After a long time, he said, "If she goes with you to the soul race's ancestral land, can you guarantee that she won't be bullied by your clansmen? That Hupa won't be coveted by some of your clansmen?" Li Shang said, "There is competition everywhere, and the soul race's ancestral land is no exception. I can't guarantee that she will have a smooth journey in the soul race's ancestral land, but I can guarantee that she will be treated fairly. As for Hupa, the soul race has always regarded the White Tiger clan as the holy beast. Anyone who dares to have thoughts that they shouldn't have will become the enemy of the entire clan." Li Shang spoke very sincerely. After interacting with her for a few years, Lu Yi naturally knew what kind of person she was. She wouldn't lie to him. But there were some things that he couldn't completely rest assured about. Li Shang said, "It's unrealistic to expect Yi to grow up without any worries or pressure. Think about your own experience. You now have the strength to surpass the star constellation realm, but how many hardships and difficulties have you experienced?" It was because he had experienced it that he didn't want the people close to him to go through it. In silence, Lu Yi suddenly turned his head and looked back, his eyes filled with cold, killing intent. "You're courting death." The Wanxiang Sea had never been a peaceful place. Other than the airspace near the boundaries of the galaxy, conflicts and battles could break out anywhere else. Lu Yi had experienced this when he first came to the Wanxiang Sea. There were always some people in this world who liked to reap without sowing. They often wandered around the Wanxiang galaxy in groups, looking for suitable targets to rob others to obtain their own cultivation resources. However, those who did this generally didn't have a good background. Because if they were from a big force, the force behind them would most likely have their own spiritual island, and they wouldn't run out to do this kind of thing. Yi hadn't been in the Wanxiang Sea for long, but she had interacted with Little Dumb, Crooked Teeth, and the others many times. She learned about the chaos in the Wanxiang Sea from them, but she really didn't expect that she would encounter such a thing on her first solo trip. She was dressed in white, and her petite figure was riding on Hupo's back. She looked at the three figures that had surrounded her from all sides. There were 2 men and 1 woman, and their cultivation wasn't high. Judging from their spiritual power waves, the woman seemed to be in the late stage of constellation, while the 2 men were only in the middle stage of constellation. The man on the left had a ferocious expression. "Little brat, hand over your storage ring if you want to live." As he spoke, he stared at the rings on Yi's hand. He glanced at him, and felt that this guy was very ugly. There were several crisscrossing scars on his face. However, although he looked fierce, Yi didn't panic at all, because she knew that there were people who wouldn't let her be bullied. Seeing her indifferent expression, the man instantly became angry. "Little brat, didn't you hear what I said?" The man on the right chuckled. "Are you scared, silly?" The woman with the highest cultivation had a cold expression, and she shouted in a low voice, "Don't be long-winded, just do it. Don't hurt her mount." This white tiger looked extraordinary, and perhaps it could be sold for a good price. Since she gave the order, the 2 middle-stage constellation cultivators naturally obeyed. One of them brazenly pounced towards Yi, while the other surged with spiritual power. He raised his hand, and a ray of light from a spell technique shot towards Yi. This spell technique didn't have much damage, mainly for fear of hurting Hupo. It only had a binding effect. Once Yi was bound, she would be a fish on the chopping board. Faced with such an attack, Yi didn't seem to react. She still sat upright on Hupo's back, not moving at all. Even Hupo didn't react at all. When the woman in the late-stage constellation realm saw this, she couldn't help but judge that this little girl probably hadn't seen much of the world and the dangers of the world. Otherwise, how could an early-stage constellation realm cultivator come to such a place alone? Her reaction was also so slow. However, at this moment, the woman's heart suddenly skipped a beat. An intense and domineering aura suddenly approached from afar. The woman turned her head abruptly, but she didn't even see who it was. She only saw a blood-red light suddenly stop in front of the little girl riding the white tiger. The binding spell in front of Yi was shattered by the blood-red light. Immediately after, a saber light flashed through the blood-red light. The middle-stage constellation realm cultivator who had just charged in front of Yi suddenly froze on the spot, maintaining his attacking posture. After a moment of silence, the blood-red light suddenly exploded. Wrapped in the thick blood-red light, a figure distorted in her vision, as if a peerless demon god had descended. Even though the aura emanating from the blood-red light was also at the late-stage constellation realm, the woman was suddenly frightened out of her wits, her heart trembling. It was hard to believe that a late-stage constellation realm cultivator could unleash such a terrifying might. "You guys are here. What is it?" From within the blood-red light came a voice as cold as ice, causing the woman and her other companion to involuntarily shiver. Only then did the two realize in horror that their companion who had pounced towards the little girl was already dead. His head flew into the sky along with a spurt of fresh blood. They didn't even see how their companion died. They couldn't fight him head-on. The late-stage constellation realm woman's sense of danger had never been so strong before. Without even thinking, she turned around to escape. However, before she could do anything, another saber light flashed in the blood-red light. The woman's expression changed drastically as she vaguely heard the roar of a beast. A bloody mouth with fangs seemed to appear in front of her, swallowing her in one gulp. Then, her consciousness fell silent. The middle-stage constellation realm cultivator who had used the binding spell was also swallowed along with her. Although the two people's cultivation was only SOSO, their backgrounds were obviously not good, and their foundations were not strong. The current Lu Yi did not need to expend too much effort to deal with such people. Behind the distorted figure wrapped in blood-red light, Yi, who was riding on Hupa, curved her eyes into crescents. The little grievance in her heart had already vanished. She knew that Lu Yi would come to save her. She also knew that Lu Yi had always known that she was following behind him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have walked so slowly. What was this? He was so adamant about not letting her go to the soul race's ancestral land, but he was dragging his feet, giving her the possibility of following him. He immediately understood that Lu Ye's feelings were very conflicted. The thick blood-red light suddenly retracted, and Lu Yi sheathed his saber. He turned around and looked at Yi with a solemn expression. The moment Lu Yi looked over at Yi, who was clearly fearless and calm when she was blocked, her expression suddenly collapsed. She sobbed as she flew out from Hupo's body and threw herself at Lu Yi with open arms, choking with sobs. "Wu, you scared me to death." End of chapter. Chapter 1650. The words of reprimand were at the tip of his tongue, but Lu Yi abruptly swallowed them back. With a soft and warm body in his arms, he could feel Yi's lingering fear and panic. He hurriedly patted Yi's shoulder. "Don't be afraid, don't be afraid. It's all right now." Was so scary. Yi's sobbing grew louder, and her body trembled even more. Unfortunately, there were no tears in her eyes. After comforting her for a long time, Yi finally calmed down. At the side, Hupo was licking his paws with a speechless look in his eyes. Yi was still curled up in Lu Ye's arms. Lu Yi grabbed her shoulder and straightened her in front of him. "Now you know how dangerous it is outside, right?" Yi wiped the non-existent tears from the corners of her eyes and nodded her head like a chick pecking at rice. "I know." Lu Yi wanted to tell her to go back obediently since she knew. After all, they hadn't left the 10,000 Elephant Sea for long. It wouldn't take him more than a few days to send Yi back. However, before he could say anything he said, Don't worry, Lu. I'll definitely follow you. As she spoke, she grabbed Lu Ye's arm with a smile, as if she wouldn't leave his side. The corners of Lu Ye's eyes twitched. Why did he feel like something was wrong? He already knew that Yi was following behind him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have walked so slowly. If he really wanted to get rid of Yi, he could just pick up his speed. Hoopa wouldn't be able to keep up with him. He thought that after experiencing this danger, Yi would change her mind. Who would have thought that this wasn't the case at all? However, Lu Yi looked at her in surprise and pulled his arm away from her. You've grown up. Don't act like a child. I like it. Yi snorted and grabbed Lu Ye's arm again. Lu Yi was helpless. Yi's eyes curved into crescents when she sensed his mood. Given the current situation, it was probably impossible to drive Yi back. Even if he really did get rid of her, it would only cause her to take unnecessary risks. If the previous incident happened again, who could guarantee that Yi would be able to get through it safely? With no other choice, Lu Yi summoned his star boat and boarded it with Yi. Yi cheered and jumped for joy. She couldn't help but jump up and hold Lu Ye's face, kissing him on the cheek. I knew Lu Yi was the best. Lu Yi rubbed the place where she was kissed in a daze for a long time before her expression turned serious. Don't be so happy just yet. You'll come with me this time. As for whether or not you want to enter the Soul Race's ancestral land, we'll talk about it later. If he had the chance, he wanted to enter the Spirita's ancestral land and take a look. But according to Li Shang, the Spirita's ancestral land was a special place that only the Spiritas could enter. It was impossible for a creature of flesh and blood like Lu Yi to enter. This was also one of the reasons why the ancestral land of the Soul Race had remained safe and sound since time immemorial. Flesh and blood could not enter, and almost no one could break through the Spirita's ancestral land. Not to mention, there were many Spirita's powerhouses, and the strength of their foundation was not inferior to any top domain. Given the current situation, he could only bring Yi along with him and observe the situation later. Yi didn't seem to care. She could tell that Lu Yi wasn't telling the truth. Once they arrived at the Spirita's ancestral land, she could just hide inside. Would Lu Yi be able to drag her out? Lu Yi sat down cross-legged on the star boat and leaned into Yi's arms. Once they arrived at the Spirita's ancestral land, who knew when they would meet again? Yi cherished this rare moment with him very much. Half a month later, the entrance to the insect tunnel appeared in the distance. There was a floating continent next to the tunnel, and there were several palace-like buildings built on the floating continent. This should be the base that the cultivators of Jianghu Galaxy had built here. There must be a Yuyao cultivator overseeing this place. All cultivators who entered and exited the tunnel had to be checked, and there were also Yuyao cultivators on the other side. Therefore, if one wanted to enter Jianghu Galaxy, they had to obtain the permission of the Yuyao cultivator overseeing this place. However, under normal circumstances, this was possible because the cultivators of Jianghu Galaxy could also enter other galaxies through other people's insect tunnels. If everyone sealed their own insect tunnels and forbade others from entering, cultivators from other galaxies wouldn't be able to come and go. It wasn't as vast as the fleets of the Three Realms and the Four Directions galaxies that Lu Yi had brought with him. It was basically no problem for a single constellation to pass through. When they arrived at the floating continent, Lu Yi put away the spirit boat. Immediately, a cultivator who sensed the commotion came out from one of the palaces to greet them. It was a mid-stage constellation cultivator, so he was naturally from Jianghu Galaxy. The person overseeing this place was a Yuyao expert, but there was definitely more than one Yuyao. There was always a need for someone to help out and take care of trivial matters. Usually, the constellation cultivators who were assigned to this place to assist the Yuyao of their galaxy had some background. This was because not only were they able to earn a generous monthly salary by working in this place, but they could also make some money. This mid-stage constellation cultivator had a chubby face and big ears, which made him look charmingly naive. Lu Yi immediately thought of Dahai of the War Province. Generally speaking, it wasn't difficult to get in touch with people like this, provided that the benefits were in place. The fat cultivator walked over and cupped his fists. Greetings, fellow Taoist. May I know what brings you here? Lu Yi returned the greeting and said, "I would like to borrow your galaxy's insect path. Please make an exception." The fat cultivator narrowed his eyes. Borrowing the path is a common occurrence. However, I hope fellow Taoist will forgive me. I need to do some registration here, so I need to ask fellow Taoist some questions. As he said so, he took out a jade slip and prepared to register it. Please ask, fellow Taoist. Lu Yi knew that this was a normal procedure. Even if Tsang Yue didn't care about a constellation cultivator entering, there were still some matters that needed to be investigated. The fat cultivator immediately asked Lu Yi a few questions, such as his background, where he was currently residing in the myriad oceanic body, his purpose of entering Tsang Yue Galaxy, and so on. Lu Yi answered them one by one. There was no way to investigate his background, so Lu Yi said that he was Wushuang Luye. The fat cultivator could only record his name. As for his purpose of entering Tsang Yue Galaxy, Lu Yi told him that he was just borrowing the path to enter the next galaxy. There was no way to investigate these matters in detail. Tsang Yue couldn't possibly send someone to accompany Lu Yi and send him away. Therefore, the registration here was just a formality. This was also related to Lu Ye's low cultivation level. If Yu Yao or Ri Zhao were here, they wouldn't be treated like this. The next part was the main event. The fat cultivator chuckled and looked at Lu Yi. Fellow Taoist, you should know the rules. 2 people and 1 beast, so... He rubbed his fingers. Lu Yi asked, "How do you accept?" The fat cultivator said, "Based on the number of people, each person will be charged 1,000 spirit jades." That was a little expensive. However, this was reasonable. Once a cultivator entered another galaxy, they could collect spirit jades there. If the spirit jades of their own galaxy were plundered, they naturally had to pay a fee. Although Lu Yi didn't have many spirit jades in his pockets, he still had 1 or 2 million spirit jades. He naturally paid the 3,000 spirit jades without hesitation. As expected, this kind of fat cultivator was usually greedy. As long as the spirit jades were in place, everything was fine. However, if the spirit jades weren't in place, who knew how they would make things difficult for him? After accepting the spirit jades, the fat cultivator immediately took out a token. Fellow Taoist, you can enter with this token. However, I still have to remind you of the rules. The spirit jades in Tsang Yue Galaxy? Fellow Taoist, you can't collect them. Although this was what he said, if Lu Yi really did it, no one would know. The prerequisite was that he didn't get discovered. Therefore, most cultivators who entered another galaxy wouldn't take it to heart even if they were warned like this. That's all? Lu Yi took the token. He originally thought that he would have to meet with Yu Yao, who was overseeing this place. Who would have thought that a single constellation would be taken care of? He didn't even have to enter the main hall. It wasn't anything troublesome in the first place. The fat cultivator chuckled and bowed again. Then, I wish fellow Taoist a smooth future. Many thanks. Lu Yi thanked him, then led Hu Pe and Yi towards the insect path. Looking in the direction Lu Yi left, the fat cultivator's face became brighter and brighter. He was really happy. He had obtained another 3,000 spirit jades. One had to know that even if he shared these spirit jades with his other senior and junior brothers, each of them would get several hundred spirit jades. Aside from overseeing this place, there was no other place that would receive this kind of free gift of spirit jades. Soon, Lu Yi and the others arrived in front of the insect path. They could sense that this insect path was very stable. In other words, there wouldn't be any side effects if they passed through it. This reminded Lu Yi of the insect path in Jade Conch. He was certain that the insect path was connected to the Wanxiang Galaxy. However, because it had only been born a few years ago, it hadn't stabilized yet. If he and Tang Jun hadn't used the Void Beast's core, they wouldn't have been able to escape. He didn't know how long it would take for the insect path to stabilize. When that time came, it would be much easier for Jade Conch's cultivators to come to the Wanxiang Galaxy. They wouldn't have to waste several years. Even the 4 cardinal galaxies would benefit from it. When the time came, they could enter the Wanxiang Galaxy through Jade Conch's insect path. It would be much better than passing through the Mist Dragon and borrowing the insect path cloud. However, not every insect path would stabilize. Some insect paths were always in chaos and couldn't be used. Some insect paths might even collapse again. Therefore, whether or not Jade Conk's insect path could be used and when it could be used was completely up to the will of the heavens. After passing through the insect path, the group arrived at the Zhangyue galaxy. There was also a floating continent here. When Lu Yi and the others appeared, a cultivator came to greet them. He checked the token Lu Yi had spent 3,000 spirit jades on and confirmed that there was no mistake. Lu Yi summoned his star boat and flew in a certain direction under Li Shang's guidance. Lu Yi had never figured out how to reach the soul race's ancestral land because Li Shang didn't tell him in detail. He only told him that he would know when the time came. Moreover, the route Li Shang gave him only led to the Zhangyue galaxy. Lu Yi couldn't help but wonder if the soul race's ancestral land was in the Zhangyue galaxy. But if that was the case, why hadn't it been discovered in the Zhangyue galaxy? He couldn't figure it out. He could only confirm the specific situation when the time came. End. Chapter 1651. 2 months after entering Zhangyue galaxy, Lu Yi finally arrived at a certain location under Li Shang's guidance. This place was obviously relatively desolate. There were no realms nearby, and there were no cultivators to be seen. After arriving, Li Shang had Lu Yi find a dead star, and the star boat sailed into it. Was the soul race's ancestral land really in Zhangyue galaxy? Lu Yi was rather surprised. As far as he knew, no one knew the exact location of the soul race's ancestral land so far. He had never thought that this secret would be revealed to him so easily. Lu Yi was rather curious and wanted to know what kind of place the soul race's ancestral land was. As if reading Lu Ye's mind, Li Shang smiled and explained, "The ancestral land is not here." Not here? Lu Yi was stunned. If it wasn't here, then why did they come here? Li Shang explained, "The ancestral land drifts outside the starry sky. It can be said to be everywhere, but also nowhere. So far, no one has truly discovered the ancestral land." These words confused Lu Yi. After pondering for a moment, Lu Yi said, "A mystic realm? Only a mystic realm would have such strange characteristics, but to say it was everywhere was a bit exaggerated. The starry sky was boundless, and no mystic realm could cover the entire starry sky. However, one thing was certain, the soul race's ancestral land drifted outside the starry sky, so no one had truly discovered it. It's similar but not exactly." Li Shang raised his hand as he spoke, and a dot of light slowly condensed in his hand. Soon, the light turned into a pure white bead. Lu Yi stared at the bead. Is this a soul bead? Star beasts had crystal cores, monster races had monster cores, and the soul race also had something similar, a soul bead. Lu Yi had only heard of it before. Even though he had known Li Shang for so long and had even experienced many dangers together, he had never seen his soul bead. This thing was a treasure. The reason why the soul race was coveted by some people with ulterior motives in the starry skies was because they had an extremely special soul possession power that could greatly increase the strength of the possessed person. The second reason was because of this soul bead. This thing contained extremely pure spiritual energy. If a cultivator could refine it, it would be of great benefit to their spiritual energy. It could be said that Li Shang's soul bead was countless times better than that top-grade spirit refining pill. If not for the fact that her cultivation was only at the late stage of the constellation realm, the soul orb would not be effective against the sunshine realm. Otherwise, the sunshine realm expert who captured her would have killed her to retrieve her soul orb. Yi could be considered a soul, but the reason she could only use the soul possession art was because she had yet to condense a soul orb of her own. The soul race had their own special cultivation method. Only by using that special cultivation method could they condense a treasure like the soul orb and then master the various secret techniques of the soul race. It was because of this that Yi wanted to follow Li Shang to the soul race's ancestral land. Li Shang had never shown his soul bead in front of Lu Yi. Now that he had taken it out, it was obvious that he was going to make a big move. Although the ancestral land is everywhere and is connected to every corner of the universe, to deepen the connection and open the channel to the ancestral land, I will have to make use of the soul orbs. Lu Yi was surprised. You mean to say that with this soul orb, you soul race can return to your ancestral land anywhere in the universe? That's right. Lu Yi was shocked. When Li Shang said that the ancestral land was everywhere, he did not think much of it and thought it was an exaggeration. But now, it seemed that it was not an exaggeration at all. The soul race's ancestral land was indeed everywhere. It was just that ordinary people could not see or feel it. This had nothing to do with cultivation. What kind of place was the soul race's ancestral land? It should be known that even the reincarnation tree could only send out clones to envelop the entire starry sky with its perception. Furthermore, this perception was not comprehensive. The reincarnation tree could only sense the location of the clones or the vicinity of the domain. It could not sense places without clones. If the soul race's ancestral land was really everywhere, then in comparison, it was much stronger than the reincarnation tree. Then Lu Yi thought of another question. If the soul orb can deepen the connection and return to the ancestral land, then why did you bring me here? In theory, Li Shang could return from the 10,000 Elephant Sea, so there was no need to waste time. Li Shang smiled. Although the soul race can sense the existence of the ancestral land as long as there is a soul orb, it is not possible to open a passage to the ancestral land from any location. Only some special locations can do so, such as here. Lu Yi finally understood why she had come here. It seemed that the soul race's ancestral land was not in Songyue Galaxy, but here was a special place that could open a passage to the soul race's ancestral land. I am not strong enough, so it may take a long time to communicate with the will of the ancestral land. I will have to trouble you to protect me during this time, Li Shang said. Lu Yi nodded. Don't worry. Li Shang immediately sat down cross-legged and closed her eyes. Soul power fluctuated from her body. It seemed that she was using her soul orb to communicate with the ancestral land. Lu Yi suddenly frowned and sent a sound transmission. Did Li Shang just mention the will of the ancestral land? He did not pay attention to it before, but now he suddenly reacted. The soul race's ancestral land had a will. This was a bit unusual. The 9 provinces also had a will, but that was Little Nine's will. Many worlds also had their own will of the world, but that will was not clear and was completely different from Little Nine's. He did not know what kind of existence the will of the soul race's ancestral land was, but if it was the same as Little Nine's, it would be incredible. Really? He obviously did not care, looking at Lu Yi with a pitiful expression. Lu Yi, you really can't go to the soul race's ancestral land with big sister Li Shang? No, after Li Shang leaves, you will come with me. Yi pursed her lips and did not say anything, but her eyes were darting around. It was unknown what kind of wicked idea she was thinking. Looking around, although this place was remote and there was a high chance that no cultivators would come to disturb them, it was better to be safe than sorry. Thinking about it, Lu Yi flicked his finger and immediately 3 blood-red lights flew out, turning into 3 figures. He focused her eyes and was immediately shocked, because these 3 figures were all Lu Yi. Moreover, in her perception, she could not see any difference, and even their auras were exactly the same as Lu Ye's. These 3 figures were naturally formed by 3 drops of precious blood. In the past 2 months, when hurrying on the road, Lu Yi, in addition to talking with Yi, had been condensing his precious blood. In addition to the drop of precious blood that was naturally born when he tempered his body to the extreme, Lu Yi had condensed 2 more drops in these 2 months. It was not that he was lazy, but that even with his foundation, condensing precious blood was not easy. Now, he only had 3 drops of precious blood. Lu Yi, there are so many of you, Yi shouted excitedly, grabbing Lu Ye's arm. She knew that Lu Yi had clones, but she had never seen so many of them. Amazing, right? Lu Yi was proud. He nodded her head like a chicken pecking rice. What kind of magical method was this? She also wanted to learn it. Unfortunately, she could see at a glance that these clones were related to a cultivator's blood essence, so she was afraid she could not learn it. Soon, the 3 clones were scattered in different directions under Lu Ye's command, in charge of guarding. He watched the 3 clones leave and tilted her head, whimsical. Lu Yi, in the future, when you have something to do and leave one for me to play with. Lu Yi laughed. That's a clone, not a cat or a dog. And the clone can't be too far away from me, or it will be useless. In terms of distance from the main body, there was a big gap between the precious blood clone and the talent tree clone. He did not know if this would improve with the improvement of his cultivation. He suddenly showed a disappointed look, suddenly finding that these clones were not so great. The 3 clones were on guard in 3 directions, so if someone came, Lu Yi would know in advance. Fortunately, this place was indeed desolate. Not to mention cultivators, even the shadow of a star beast could not be seen. Li Shang had been sitting cross-legged, using his soul bead to communicate with the will of the ancestral land, his soul power fluctuating. After half a day, there were some changes on the other side. When Lu Yi turned his head to look, he saw the void in front of Li Shang rippling like water, then the space became blurred and distorted, and in the blink of an eye, the space turned into a fog-like existence. The fog continued to distort, and then colorful lights blindly refracted. A moment later, a blooming lotus appeared in Lu Ye's vision. The lotus was like a real thing, blooming with supreme multicolored light, beautiful and magnificent. When it appeared, Lu Yi even felt an instinctive desire in his divine soul, as if he smelled meat when he was hungry. He immediately understood that this lotus-like existence had a great effect on the growth of his divine soul. The lotus was in full bloom, and the initial fog lingered around the stamen, leading to an unknown place. Lu Yi suppressed the instinctive desire and carefully sensed it. He could vaguely feel that there was a void power fluctuating from the stamen. It was a little similar to the feeling he had in the insect path. He couldn't help but be moved. The lotus appearance was a little strange, but in the end, this was essentially an insect path. An insect path leading to the ancestral land of the soul race. What was the name of the soul race's ancestral land? It actually had such a wonderful power. One must know that insect paths were basically innate. Even an existence like the reincarnation tree could not create an insect path out of thin air, and could only rely on the connection between the main body and the clones to circulate. But Li Shang just communicated with the soul race's ancestral land, and a small insect path appeared just like that. It was a little beyond understanding. Almost at the same time as Lu Yi was shocked, Yi, who had quietly left his side, suddenly rushed towards the lotus. But her body had just moved when the back of her neck was grabbed by a big hand. Yi turned her head and looked at Lu Yi behind her, dancing with joy. "Lu Yi, let go of me. Don't even think about it." Lu Yi snorted. Chapter 1652. After being together for so many years, Lu Yi knew what Yi was up to with just a glance. He hadn't decided whether to let Yi and Li Shang go to the soul race's ancestral land, so he couldn't just let her go in. But just as he grabbed Yi, a tiger's roar came from the front. Lu Yi looked up and was stunned, because Hupo was actually standing on the lotus. There was a traitor. Lu Yi had never thought that Hupo would stab him in the back. This was obviously under Yi's orders, or else Hupo wouldn't have done so. He immediately understood that Yi's actions were just a pretense. It would be great if she succeeded, but if she didn't, she could still attract his attention. Hupo would be able to act calmly. Yi was Hupo's sorrowful spirit. If Hupo entered the soul race's ancestral land, how could Lu Yi not let Yi follow? "Hupo, you did well." Yi was held in Lu Yi's hand, no longer angry. "You, come out." Lu Yi stared at Hupo. Hupo, who had been so majestic just now, immediately lowered his head and looked away guiltily. "You can't come out." Yi shouted at Hupo. "Don't forget what I told you before." Lu Yi didn't know what Yi had said to Hupo, but when Hupo heard Yi's words, he actually raised his head and his evasive gaze became resolute. That's right, he and Yi's strength were getting further and further away from Lu Yi's. If they wanted to become stronger, they had to enter the soul race's ancestral land. This was their only and best chance. Otherwise, they could never comprehend the soul race's secrets just by cultivating in the Wanxiang Sea. Lu Yi sighed. Children were getting older and harder to discipline. On the side, Li Shang looked at Hupo with bright eyes, his mood lifted. Lu Yi didn't realize anything when Hupo stepped on the lotus, but Li Shang knew that this was the best proof that Hupo had the bloodline of a sacred beast. Flesh and blood couldn't enter the soul race's ancestral land, only sacred beasts were an exception. If Hoopa didn't have the bloodline of a sacred beast, he wouldn't even be able to touch the lotus, let alone step on it. At this moment, Hoopa was standing on top of the lotus flower. This undoubtedly proved that her previous judgment was correct. Hoopa was indeed the Spirita's sacred beast. It was fine if they weren't sure before, but now that they were, Li Shang felt that no matter what, Hoopa had to bring Yi into the Spirita's ancestral land. Otherwise, it wouldn't just be their loss, it would be the Spirita's loss as well. However, Lu Ye's attitude. Li Shang turned to look at Lu Yi. Just as he was about to persuade him, Lu Yi took a step forward and said, "If you don't come out, I'll drag you out." As soon as he finished speaking, he was already standing on top of the lotus flower. He reached out and grabbed the back of Hoopa's neck. Li Shang's eyes suddenly widened. What was going on? Hoopa had the bloodline of a holy beast, so it was one thing for him to be able to stand on the lotus, but how could Lu Yi be able to do it as well? He couldn't say that Lu Yi also had the bloodline of a holy beast, could he? At this moment, on the lotus flower, Lu Yi was carrying Yi in one hand and Hoopa in the other. The spirit and tiger looked at each other helplessly. Lu Yi was startled, because when he stepped on this strange lotus flower, the talent tree in his body suddenly had a strange reaction. This reaction wasn't the kind of reaction when an external force invaded his body and needed to be destroyed. It was a feeling that Lu Yi had never felt before. It was as if the talent tree in his body had a strange resonance with the lotus flower under his feet. However, when he tried to sense it with his mind, there was no reaction. Without waiting for him to think too much, the lotus flowers slowly closed. Lu Yi was startled and was about to leave when he suddenly realized that as the lotus flower closed, his body seemed to be fixed on the petals and couldn't move at all. Li Shang hurriedly flashed over and said, "The passage to the ancestral land won't last long. It's about to close. Don't panic, fellow Taoist." He still looked at Lu Yi in shock, unable to understand what was going on. The ancestral land didn't seem to reject Lu Yi. Lu Yi wasn't very panicked, but this matter was a little baffling. Originally, he wanted to see the situation before deciding whether to let Yi enter the Spirita's ancestral land. But now he had to go in. Not only did he have to go in, but he also had to go in. Well, it just so happened that he had this idea before. It would be best if he could enter the Spirita's ancestral land for himself. He hurriedly constructed a void spirit pattern. In the next moment, 3 blood-red lights flashed and the 3 scattered avatars were recalled, turning into 3 drops of blood that seeped into Lu Ye's body. The lotus flower completely closed and disappeared without a trace. There were no traces of the insect path left here. Only after being wrapped in the lotus form could Lu Ye's body move. He put down Hoopa and knocked Hoopa's head. Hoopa felt wronged. He was the mastermind and he was at most an accomplice. Why was he the one being beaten? He didn't feel anything strange. Lu Yi had just finished teaching Hoopa a lesson when the lotus flower wrapped around them suddenly collapsed. In that instant, Lu Yi couldn't help but feel his mind shake. An incomparably comfortable feeling came from his soul, like a fish in water or a bird in its nest. He turned his head to look around and realized that he was standing in the middle of a void. As far as his eyes could see, there were huge lotus flowers imprinted in his eyes. They looked similar to the lotus flowers that had appeared when Li Shang had connected to the ancestral land, but the size was completely different. These lotus flowers were red, green, pink, yellow, purple. There were also 2-colored, 3-colored, 5-colored ones. The entire world was a riot of colors and extremely gorgeous. This was the Spirita's ancestral land? Lu Yi looked at it curiously. He had traveled extensively and had been to several different galaxies. He had seen many different magnificent wonders in the starry sky, but there really wasn't a place as strange as the Spirita's ancestral land. Although he was in the void, Lu Yi was sure that this was not the starry sky in the ordinary sense. This was because there was a strange energy drifting about here. It was a kind of energy that was greatly beneficial to the soul. In other words, cultivating in this kind of place did not help one's cultivation, but it was unimaginable for one's soul. Wow! He was also dazzled. Although Li Shang had told her a lot about the Spirita's ancestral land, it was only hearsay. Now that she saw it with her own eyes, she found that this strange world was even more beautiful than Li Shang had described. She immediately fell in love with this kind of place, especially the environment. It gave her an extremely comfortable feeling, one that was even stronger than Lu Ye's. Even Hupa showed an intoxicated expression. Lu Yi suddenly turned his head and looked at Li Shang. "What's wrong?" At this moment, Li Shang was looking at him with a strange expression, his eyes full of disbelief. "Fellow Taoist, you? How did you come in?" Li Shang was puzzled, but he didn't know how to ask. Lu Yi frowned. Li Shang said, "The Spirita's ancestral land is a place where flesh and blood cannot enter. Besides saint beasts, no living being with flesh and blood has ever entered since ancient times, so, how did you come in?" Lu Yi was about to say that it was the lotus that wrapped him up and brought him in, but on second thought, if flesh and blood really couldn't enter, then he really shouldn't have been able to come in. He suddenly remembered that when he stepped on the lotus, the talent tree in his body had some strange reaction, vaguely resonating with the lotus, but when he checked, he didn't find anything. Could it be that his entrance here had something to do with the talent tree? But what did the talent tree have to do with this place? "I don't know." Lu Yi shook his head. Li Shang didn't think Lu Yi could give an answer, so after thinking for a while, he said, "It seems that the ancestral lands will allow you to come in, so it let you in." The fact that flesh and blood couldn't enter was not a restriction of this world, but the ancestral lands will. If the ancestral lands was willing to let Lu Yi in, then there was no problem. But what was so special about Lu Yi that the ancestral lands would treat him like this? Thinking about it carefully, Li Shang found that Lu Yi was indeed quite special. At the very least, before meeting Lu Yi, he never thought that a cultivator could be so strong. Maybe this was why the ancestral lands treated him so well? Since he couldn't figure it out, he couldn't explore it. Temporarily suppressing the doubts in his heart, Li Shang said, "Come with me, we're going to see the elder on duty." In any case, she brought a holy beast back this time, and Lu Yi, a human, had to greet the elder on duty. Moreover, those people in Immortal Essence City also had to be settled. This was not something she could decide as a constellation. Unexpectedly, as soon as her voice fell, a powerful aura rushed over from a distance. Li Shang quickly turned his head to look. Lu Ye's expression also turned cold, because the person who came was obviously Riguang. Almost the next moment when he felt the aura, a light appeared in Lu Ye's vision, and then the light came close, revealing the figure of a young man. At first glance, this young man looked young, dressed in a black robe, but since it was Riguang, his age was no longer accurate. Li Shang was startled and hurriedly bowed. "Greetings, Patriarch." She was secretly surprised. She had just returned, so why was the Patriarch here? Although she was a soul and had cultivated to a constellation, to be honest, she had only seen the Patriarch twice in so many years. This was the third time. This was because in normal times, only the elder on duty was in charge of the clan. The Patriarch did not show himself. Patriarch? Lu Yi knew that as an outsider, she had to pay a visit to the experts here after entering the ancestral land, but she did not expect that before she went to pay a visit, the Patriarch would appear. And it was the Patriarch of the Soul Clan. He had obviously noticed the commotion here. After thinking carefully, Lu Yi remembered the conversation between Li Shang and the reincarnation tree. From this, it seemed that this was Hun Quebec. Lu Yi could feel that this Patriarch of the Soul Clan was stronger than all the Riguang she had seen before. The only one who could be compared to him was probably Ma Bin, but Lu Yi did not have a clear impression of Riguang's strength, so she could not make a correct comparison. However, this Hun Ke was definitely much stronger than Riguang of Wuding. This should be the top Riguang. "Greetings, Senior." Lu Yi bowed respectfully. He also bowed at the side, and even Hupa lowered his head. End of chapter. That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.